The Browns, they're putrid. They're the worst team in the NFL.
The 2024 season is over.
Lamar Jackson can't win the playoffs. He'll win a third MVP, though, so that's great. Drew Sample is the most important piece of the Bengals offense next year.
Go Joe Burrow. He deserves to be MVP. I wish he was the Browns quarterback. Kind of mean that.
If you're looking for the most reactionary, silly, and unserious show on the internet, then you're home. Live from Hamilton, Ohio, it's Off the Bench by Chatterbox Sports on 1410 ESPN Radio.
Everybody, welcome in. Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Off and rolling here to kick off the week. All things Super Bowl 59 reaction, of course. And just like we all predicted, the Kansas City Chiefs getting their asses whooped. I don't know if we all predicted that, but we hoped for it. And I think a lot of winners came out of last night. The Eagles, the biggest winners, but I feel like a lot of people won last night. But we welcome you in. Off the bench again, Justin Kenner, Elliot Ring, Jacob Tissett, Casey McAllister. We'll start with you, Casey. Good morning. How are we?
Good morning. Good morning. I'm doing good. I enjoyed watching that SmackDown. My dad, he was really confident going into that game. He comes over to me and he's like, son, I have a very large amount of money on Eagles, like minus 9.5 or something crazy like that. He had like $50 on it, which is a large amount of money for him.
Love that.
Good for him.
And I mean, it cashed like just. He just knew. He just knew that they were gonna beat them down. Like, Dad, how do you know this? How do you know this information? He's just like, son, it's never been done before. 3 peats have never been done before. It's just too hard to do. So, congrats to the Eagles on winning in spectacular fashion, like the way that they did, guys.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm doing great. Thanks. I know I lost everything last night, but I'm still here and I'm still strong. So shout out to me for having the courage to come to the office.
How
today.
much everything is everything?
It was funny. I was talking with my grandpa yesterday and he's like, so how much you got? I got a lot. I mean, I got a lot on it. And I'm like, there's literally one scenario that can't happen. There's one. And it's that the Eagles absolutely blow out the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm like, as long as that doesn't happen, we're fine. Like, it can go any other direction. I'm going to be great for this game. Well, I would say a quarter into the game, I knew where that game was going. And legitimately, I've never seen such a poor display of football from any team, maybe ever. We were talking about it before the show. If you look back in the history books on certain games, you're going to see like the final score, the final stats, whatever stat that Patrick Mahomes got last night, any touchdown pass, any yard, that doesn't count. All of it does not count. He had 20-something yards at halftime. He had 20-something yards. They had more points than he had yards at halftime. And then in the third quarter, again, the Eagles' defense just started giving up because they knew they were Super Bowl champions. So Patrick Mahomes scored 3 of the most disgusting garbage time touchdowns one will ever see. His entire stats, all of it, except for the interceptions and fumble and bad stats. All the good stats, they don't count. They're not even a part of that game. Don't even look at it. 22 points, get rid of them all. They lost that game 34-0. 34-0 before the Philadelphia Eagles said, you know what, who cares? Put Kenny Pickett in. Doesn't matter anymore. That's how bad that game was. I'm going to say that game was worse than the Broncos-Seahawks 43-8 game. I think that game was better. This game last night, that was the worst Super Bowl I've ever seen. Good for Jalen Hurts. We didn't want to have that conversation.
We're going to Hurts conversation.
We're going to be having the Jalen Hurts conversation.
We'll have it all summer. It's going to be very annoying.
Good for the Eagles. Good for the Eagles winning another Super Bowl. Like, it's good for Nick Sirianni. Nick Sirianni, a guy who gets slandered all the time on this show. That guy, again, all he does is win.
Both football champions on the hot seat earlier in the respective seasons.
Yeah. I know I lost it all last night. But I'm happy to see that the Eagles just absolutely kicked their teeth in. It was never a game. Not one time. They had 1 first down. They had 1 first down on the first play of the game, the Kansas City Chiefs. They didn't get another first down in the first half. Absolutely insane.
Yeah, it was really bad. I don't understand why people are acting like Mahomes' career ended last night.
Oh, I'm going to say
he's not the GOAT. His career's over. He's not a good quarterback. He's 3-2 in Super Bowls. You know, he's been to 7 straight AFC championships. He's a really good quarterback. He's got a long time to play. He's going to be all right. He has a great foundation for his career. He's an all-time quarterback still. Played really bad last night, but he's all right.
As bad of a quarterback could play, that's what he played.
In fact, Tom Brady went 3-2 in his first 5 Super
Never got
Bowls.
blown out. Patrick Mahomes now has a minus 15 or minus 20 differential in Super Bowls played.
Yikes.
Also a 7-7 touchdown interception ratio.
Yikes. I'm just saying, listen, I'm not going to sit here and say that the guy isn't a good quarterback, but actually, you know what I will say? He's not a good quarterback. This guy was assisted by the referees and the greatest spot a quarterback could have possibly landed in the Kansas City Chiefs with Andy Reid. No, every quarterback that would have been drafted there would have been the best quarterback of all time. He's a benefit of that. He's a bad quarterback. And none of this has anything to do with the fact that I lost a lot of money on him last night.
There it is. Okay. All right. I was just making sure. I was like, what is happening? And then there it is. You're upset. You lost some money. Not some. It sounds like a little bit more than some.
Well, it was just, yeah, I mean, it was the
everything.
Yeah, it was the biggest loss I've ever had. So I'm gonna get through it. We're gonna power through it. We're gonna bide our time until the end of March when a certain tournament happens.
Did
and
you
I'll
lose
try to win
enough
it back
that you're
there.
going to do a March break? You take off until conference tournaments?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm out. I'm retired. I'm retired for the next month, and that's breaking news. I'm retired from gambling for the next month because Patrick Mahomes literally couldn't have played any worse. That was the worst quarterback performance of all time. Of all time.
I'll work on the graphic.
They weren't blitzed, Kinner. They were never blitzed.
I saw that.
They just sucked.
You know, all 6 quarterbacks in Super Bowl history that weren't blitzed lost the game.
Really?
No quarterback in Super Bowl history has ever not been blitzed and won the game.
That's insane.
Well, you got to think the only way you're not blitzing is if you're getting consistent pressure with 4, and it's impossible to win a game if that's the case.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
What do you guys
Can you
think?
believe the Dolphins? Sorry, but can you believe the Dolphins kicked Vic Fangio out of Miami because he coached him too hard? Seems like he's a pretty good defensive coordinator.
Outrageous.
They said he coached him too hard, so they kicked him out of
Outrageous.
Miami. But Super Bowl defense.
By the way, what do you guys think? In case he said this before we started the show, what do you think went wrong with Kansas City, or is that just who they've been? Because Casey said it before. Like we literally we were kind of blinded by the 15-2 record.
Yeah.
Maybe 16-1 if they actually played their starters in that final week. Not probably. They would be 16-1 if they played their starters in the final game of the regular season. Good teams find ways to win. Obviously, they did that all season. I mean, they're still a good team. This team's going to pick up where they left off and probably be better than they were this year, next season, but and healthier, you would imagine. But did something go wrong with this team in this Super Bowl, or is that did this team just get exposed once they finally went up against a buzzsaw? I have to go back and look at their schedule. I'm trying to figure out who the best team that they faced. Obviously, they played the Ravens in week 1. Cincinnati obviously took it to them. I mean, really put a scare in them in week 2. They played good teams throughout the season, but I don't think they played a buzzsaw like the Eagles throughout. I mean, what's the takeaway for what happened to the Chiefs? Because we could talk about what happened, but why did it happen? And should we be surprised that it happened? I think we fell for the mystique of the Chiefs. Like they just always find ways to win, no matter what. Like you can't count them out. We got to the point like we do with the Patriots. It doesn't make sense anymore. Even when the team doesn't look like they're better than the other team, you shouldn't bet against them because that's just what happens, right? Well, it caught up with everybody last night because the Chiefs were not even a good football team last night. The Eagles were just head and shoulders better than them. And I think if they play again, might be a little closer, but I still think the Eagles come out with a double-digit win after what we saw last night. The Eagles are that good, but how good or bad are the Chiefs in your opinion?
The Chiefs were exposed twice in recent memory, and it was the Buccaneers Super Bowl and then the Super Bowl against the Eagles, both blowouts. 2 of the worst offensive performances we've ever seen in the Super Bowl, both by Patrick Mahomes, ironically enough. And both times was when his O-line didn't play up to snuff. Patrick Mahomes doesn't survive with crazy amounts of pressure. We've seen it now a couple times. And they've done a good job in his career of protecting him. It's been a revolving door at tackle, but they've done a good enough job on the inside with Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith that they've been able to keep him upright. And last night, when he faced the pressure that we've seen some other quarterbacks, most notably in Cincinnati, face, he crumbled. And he was unable to do it. He was pressured on almost 50% of his dropbacks, which is nearly impossible to overcome. So, I'm not expecting him to have a great game, but he played absolutely horrible when the O-line wasn't there, and it's the second time we've seen this happen. And it's important to note that Trey Smith is a free agent this year. They're all pro guards. So maybe if they can't get that O-line fixed, this could be the start of the decline of this Chiefs dynasty because we've seen time and time again how important keeping pressure off of Patrick Mahomes is.
I don't think this game is about the Kansas City Chiefs. I think that was about the Philadelphia Eagles. I like we've said it the past couple of years, oh, the Chiefs, they don't look too good. They don't look too good, and then they win 18 games. So I don't think they were a bad team. I think they were the second best team in the NFL this season, and I don't think it was particularly close. Like I do think that. I just think there was such a high step up with the Eagles. Like I think their defense is unbelievable. They were able to do it with Saquon Barkley. They made the biggest offseason move in Saquon Barkley this year, who got him there. Didn't have a good game last night at all. In fact, if I would have told any of us in this room that he'd have like 30 carries for 50 yards, we would have said it would have been a monster blowout for Kansas City. But like they find ways to win. I know we don't want to have the Jalen Hurts conversation. Jalen Hurts is a good quarterback. He's a good quarterback. And he was able to get them there, and he was able to win the game last night when Saquon Barkley couldn't get anything going at all. Like, that's a testament to how good they are. Not to mention, like, they have 3 losses on their schedule this year. I'd argue they only have 1. 2 of the games, they legitimately weren't healthy. Like, they people forget about that in the large scheme of things. You know, that loss to the Commanders, they lost like 36-33 or whatever. Like, Jalen Hurts didn't play in that game. He played for the first quarter and then left. I think they were as good as the Kansas City Chiefs through the regular season, maybe better. We just got distracted by the little 3 at the end of their record.
That and the distractions with the Eagles throughout. I think we kept feeling like there was we kept waiting for that volcano to erupt because the team drama, there was drama throughout the season. Coach looked like a psychopath. Still don't know what to make of him. It's not that I don't know what to make of him. Obviously, head coach that wins a Super Bowl, and it's not like he just got him there once. He got him there twice, and they were able to overcome it. And they beat the Chiefs. They dominate the Chiefs. They dominate Patrick Mahomes. So there's a lot to be said there. But we're going to step away for a few moments because you said we're going to have the Jalen Hurts conversation. I know that Jacob, this is painful for him, but
not at all.
Step away. I want to talk about legacies. Okay, we're going to step away when we come back. Legacies. Last night's Super Bowl 59. Help or hurt? We're going to go through a couple players. Last night's Super Bowl, did it hurt a couple of these players' legacies? Did it help the legacies? We're going to talk about all of that when we come back. This is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. (40-22), the final last night. The Eagles knock off the Chiefs in Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans. Jalen Hurts, Nick Sirianni, A.J. Brown. I mean, the list goes. I mean, Saquon Barkley. A lot of stars in the NFL won their first Super Bowl last night, and to do it against the Kansas City Chiefs made it just that much more sweeter, especially after losing to the Chiefs in the Super Bowl in a close one just 2 years ago in controversial fashion with that late call. We did not. And by the way, I thought we would be talking about some crazy call, some bad officiating today, but usually in blowouts, we don't care about officiating. You know, we only talk about officiating because of how close all the Chiefs games are. Their streak is still intact. Technically, they have won 18 straight one-possession games, so that streak still remains because it was not close last night. But that's why, you know, we've talked about that too. One reason why it feels like the Chiefs get a lot of help, and regardless of whether you think they do or not, it just, the refs are always put in the situation to have to help them at times, it seems, because every game is close that they play in. Last night, not the case. You're not going to beat them in a close game. To beat them, you have to blow them out, and that's what the Eagles did, no doubt. But legacies last night, because that's what this world of sports is, right? Like after a championship game, right away we start having the, you know, all the GOAT conversations, or we take people out of the GOAT conversation. I mean, all the fun stuff that comes with it. Let's start taking a look at some of the legacies as far as who had their legacy helped last night and who had their legacy hurt last night. Let's start right away. Let's go to Travis Kelce. All right, from a legacy standpoint, did last night's Super Bowl performance for him, did it hurt his legacy or help his legacy? I think we can all agree didn't really help it by any means, but how much did it hurt it in your opinion?
Didn't hurt it. It didn't hurt it at all because I think we all knew what Travis was this year. He's aging. He's getting up there. He didn't have as many touchdowns this year. Didn't have as many yards this year. He just wasn't the Travis Kelce we've seen prior. It's what happens when you get old. He's had a Hall of Fame career. Maybe he's the best tight. You could argue that he's the best tight end in the history of the sport. So that game last night meant pretty much nothing to his legacy. Didn't help it. It just didn't hurt it either.
Yeah, I 100% agree. What you think of Travis Kelce, you've already made your mind up, whether you think he's the greatest tight end of all time or whether you value actually playing tight end and blocking. Wherever you stand on that argument, you stand there. And I don't think his play last night really swung that in any way. I mean, he has the record for most 1,000-yard seasons in a career. I don't think his legacy can really be hurt by much at this point.
Yeah, and look, he's a guy that, I mean, look, I expected a bigger game out of him, mainly because of the deficiencies of the Eagles' defense. We talked about that on Friday, like some of the ways that, the Eagles, that the Chiefs can hurt the Eagles' defense is because they have not been very good at defending the tight end. And obviously, he did not have a great game. He finished with, where is he at? 4 catches, 39 yards. Didn't even have a catch until, the end of the third quarter, I think was his first catch.
Like Elliot said, when the Eagles stopped trying.
Yeah, when they stopped.
Like I said, every offensive statistic that the Kansas City Chiefs had does not count last night. Juju Smith-Schuster has the only catch of the game for the Chiefs. He had an 11-yard reception in the first half. That was it. Every other play does not count.
So in Casey, I think it's a unanimous decision here. I don't think we look at Travis Kelce any different today than we did heading into yesterday's Super Bowl 59, correct?
Yeah, I think he's one of the greatest of all time. I mean, there's nothing that I would take away from this game that would detract from his legacy, in my opinion. And again, we mentioned it earlier, I think, and we'll get into this in this segment, but this was a little bit more about the Eagles than it was Kansas City. But let's move on.
Let's go to, the easy one right here, Patrick Mahomes, because that's what a lot of people are talking about today. Quarterbacks, if you win, you get a ton of credit. If you lose, you get all the blame. That's just how this works. Coaches, quarterbacks, all that. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes, everyone was throwing out the GOAT, label for him even before heading into yesterday's Super Bowl. They could have been eliminated in the AFC Championship game. People would still be giving him that title. But because it's not just that he lost the Super Bowl, it's because of how poorly he played. He's become now vulnerable to people taking shots at him and saying, keep him out of the Tom Brady discussion, that Tom Brady never got blown out in Super Bowls and yada, yada. Last night's performance, last night's results, from a legacy standpoint, did it help Patrick Mahomes' legacy? Did it build onto it, or did it hurt it, in your opinion?
Hurt it as much as it possibly could. There's no possible outcome to that game that could hurt his legacy more than what we saw last night. It definitely knocks him out of the GOAT conversation for the foreseeable future, but friendly reminder, he's not 30 yet, so maybe he can crack that door open again at some point. Right now, it's dead. We will not bring up Patrick Mahomes in the GOAT conversation for a while. But to act like that is done for good, I think, is certainly a little bit reactionary to a guy that's not even 30 yet. But definitely absolutely terrible for his legacy and where he was building to. Yeah,
you win last night. You're 4-1 in Super Bowls. You have the first team to ever win a three-peat, which is it's so preposterous that that's even possible in this league with as much parity as there is. He lost last night in such a way that I don't think he could be in that conversation again. I really don't. If he gets to 8, fine, we'll talk. If he gets to 7, fine, we'll talk. I don't think he will. Again, he's been a great quarterback. He's been the best quarterback in the league for a long time. I think you're starting to see that slowly shift. Because eventually this Chiefs run has to end. I think that was the end last night. For a while, the Patriots had 3 separate dynasties. The Chiefs can absolutely, in 5 years, 10 years down the line, figure something out. I'm saying this current dynasty that the Chiefs have, I think that's done. They're way too old. They don't have enough talent. They don't have running backs. They need a pretty much an overhaul on offense as of right now, outside of their quarterback, who, by the way, played about as bad as you could play this year. He didn't play well this year. He wasn't a Pro Bowler for the first time ever. Not that ever matters, but I'm just saying, I think people uttered, and including myself, I said coming into probably the game that he was going to pass Tom Brady eventually as the best quarterback of all time. I don't think he should be mentioned in the same breath as Tom Brady. I don't think so. I don't think Tom Brady would have rolled over and quit just as much as they did last night, because that was an embarrassment.
How much has Travis Kelce masked their inability to replace Tyreek Hill over the last couple of years? Because we saw it last night. The receivers, absolutely terrible at getting separation, really no threat in the passing game until very, very late. And, I mean, I feel like Travis Kelce getting 1,400, 1,300 yards out of the tight end position over the last couple of years without Tyreek Hill in Kansas City has really masked that because their picks for those positions haven't been good. I know Rashee Rice has kind of been the guy that's taken that role, and he was hurt, obviously didn't play last night. But Xavier Worthy had a great game in garbage time, but those guys consistently weren't doing enough to get open. And I think maybe as Travis Kelce continues to fall off, we'll see what you're saying there as an end to the dynasty if they can't find a way to get another receiving threat.
Yeah, I think Travis Kelce hit it all, and I think as his career comes to an end, and if they were smart, they'd probably try to move off of him pretty soon because the guy can't run, he can't really catch. It's over. And then there was more miscommunication last night between him and Patrick than I've ever seen. It's just, if we talk about the legacy of Mahomes, great quarterback, he'll go down as one of the greats, won't go down as the greatest.
So it is funny seeing the parallels, though, between the Chiefs and the Patriots, where the Patriots' biggest flaw, as great as they were, they couldn't draft wide receivers, right? And it's like, once the Patriots moved on, or once the Chiefs moved on from Tyreek Hill, they haven't really been able to find that next dynamic wide receiver. They've gotten a lot of that pass-catching production out of their tight end. Ironically enough, that's where Tom Brady, a lot of his, production from the pass catcher standpoint came from his tight ends. They were very tight end friendly throughout his run in New England. But yeah, I think it's an important offseason coming up for the Chiefs. But the reason I can't say that Patrick Mahomes took a major hit last night is we just listed the aging tight end, the lack of receivers. The offensive line had its probably worst performance of the season for the Chiefs. And although everyone might just, shovel that into the excuse pile, the fact is there's no quarterback out there that's going to be able to play at a high level when you don't have pass catchers, when your tight end is not producing at all and your offensive line is not holding you upright either. So the ironic thing was the lack of pass rush from the Eagles, and yet they were still getting to them. Just talked about how bad that O-line was last night. So Patrick Mahomes wasn't great, but I don't think anybody was great on the offensive side of the ball last night, and I think that's why I'm not willing to throw him under the bus completely yet. I am curious to see what they do this offseason, though, because I think that this idea, I think the Chiefs have been punished by the success of Patrick Mahomes Patrick Mahomes has been punished for his greatness because I think the Chiefs have done what we've talked about with the Bengals at times. Patrick Mahomes is so great, we don't need to go get an elite wide receiver. We don't need to go spend a ton of money on pass catchers. I think they're rethinking that now. I think they're rethinking that as far as that's concerned, and I'll be curious what their offseason's like. So that's why I can't throw Patrick Mahomes. He took a hit. I'm not going to go as far as you guys and say it took a major hit last night, but I don't think he's going to be getting a ton of love because the last memory of Patrick Mahomes in 24 is his poor performance in the biggest game of all. But hey, 250 yards, 3 touchdowns. What's wrong with that?
History books will look back not too mean on this, I think.
That's the craziest part because if you watch that game even for a second,
you're right.
You know how terrible he was.
Oh,
and Jacob said it, like 7 touchdowns, 7 interceptions in Super Bowls. That might have been before the last one. I don't know exactly when that was tweeted out. And then you have 2 absolute stinkers from Patrick Mahomes. They've been blown out twice now. I know. It's kind of a silly point to make when they're 3-2 in Super Bowls, but it is something. It's like Tom Brady wouldn't have gotten blown out like that. No way.
On the final one on the Chiefs side, obviously Andy Reid, because Andy Reid, everyone was. By the way, not propping up. These guys haven't fallen off a cliff. It's just this is what comes with losing. When we over prop them up with all the winning, this is what they're not accustomed to, which is losing at this time of the season. Andy Reid, I still think is it sounds weird saying underrated, but I don't think he gets propped up into the elite head coach category as much as what I think he should in the history books. Like overall, I think right now we acknowledge how great he is as a coach in today's NFL, but it still feels like there's a gap between him and Belichick, which is wild. How much did his legacy take a hit last night with that? Not just the loss, but to fit in with everything else we've talked about, the way that they lost. How much of a legacy hit did he take, Andy Reid?
I don't think nearly as much because of how bad Mahomes played. I think a lot of that spotlight and legacy hit is going towards Mahomes and not as much towards Andy Reid. I think it should probably be more of a split than it is. I don't know how much blame you put on a coach when the quarterback does play that poorly. But yeah, I think he definitely took a hit, not quite as big as Mahomes, but I can't say it wasn't nothing.
I'm going to say it didn't really take a hit really either. I just don't think that when you talk about Andy Reid, like that game will be brought up much. You'll bring up the Super Bowls that he won, and good for him. He's won 3 of them. I just don't think that's a legacy-defining performance. When again, your team plays as bad as they could possibly play. That's not. That's. I mean, sure. I mean, Nick Sirianni outcoached him in that game last night too. But it was. I mean, the story of the game was The Eagles were just better. I mean, flat out at every position they were better. And then not to mention, it was Patrick Mahomes looked like the quarterback that we saw all year, and that was an underwhelming quarterback.
I think more about what Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes lost is what they stood to gain and then didn't.
Yeah.
Because getting the three-peat and being the first team to ever do that, especially with where they both already rank accolades-wise, it would have just vaulted them into another category. It would have been a feather in their cap that no one else has, and it would have been so massive for legacy debates. Just not having that innately means you lost a lot. So I think both those guys, and I guess throw Kelsey in that mix as well in terms of the legacy talk, all three of those guys, whether they're already Hall of Famers, whether they're already all-time talents, losing the opportunity to have that three-peat, because you got to win two more to even have that chance again.
Yeah.
So, I mean, who knows if they'll ever have a chance to win three in a row again. Losing the chance at that definitely hurt their legacies just because no one will probably have that chance again.
How much different do you think this offseason will be for the Chiefs? Do you agree that I think they're going to put a little bit more emphasis on the pass catcher side? I still feel like for years they've relied on Patrick Mahomes to dig themselves out of those situations, and mainly because he has. With that not being the case, a very underwhelming offensive attack this year. You know, people could say, well, Patrick Mahomes regressed. Well, he regressed statistically, and I don't think he had the help that he's had in years past. I think that they have to make sure that they provide that for him. You know, we talk in Cincinnati, Jamar Chase going to be there and how they need to keep T and keep these weapons around Joe Burrow. I think they need to start adding weapons to Patrick Mahomes because I don't think the guy has elite weapons anymore. You have an elite name in Travis Kelce, but I don't think you've been getting elite production out of that tight end. Started the dip last year, and then obviously throughout this past season. I think it's going to be an interesting offseason for them as far as who they target for the offensive side of the ball.
If it was 2015, the Chiefs would have the best receiving room in the league. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins, Travis Kelce, it'd be unreal. But they have to get a dominant receiver. And maybe they believe that is Rashee Rice, and they go and get a number two. I don't necessarily know. Certainly coming off that injury, I would not lean to having him jump into that role next year, especially if you want to compete. I think wide receiver has to be towards the top of their list. But I mentioned it earlier, Trey Smith is a free agent. And we saw how bad Mahomes looked with a poor offensive line. Maybe they prioritize that more than anything and think top-tier protection can, again, kind of hide the fact that they don't have an elite receiver. So either way, I think there's going to be a lot of focus on that Chiefs offense this year. There's going to have to be some changes made, and there's going to have to be some money spent. They've found a way to kind of skate under the radar and not spend a ton of money on that offensive side of the ball. They're going to have to spend some serious money on some stars.
They're going to have to overhaul the offense. I mean, they don't have – I mean, we were talking about it before the show. DeAndre Hopkins dropping that pass in the second quarter, that was the moment the game ended. Like he was wide open, would have gotten down inside the red zone, was going to be a 50-yard completion. Again, I can't say just how wide open he was. And a complete miss, fumbled, tripped over his shoes. It was a disaster. And this whole season, we'll see what Rashee Rice is going forward. I think he's a solid wide receiver. But, you know, I think the rest of the players in that offense, no disrespect to Pacheco. I know the injury he suffered this year was brutal, but he was terrible since returning. Kareem Hunt.
How many seventh-round picks have multiple years of great production?
Yeah, I don't know.
It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, I Brock Purdy.
Well.
I think I think that, you know, the Chiefs are going to have to try, and the defense has been such a story for them the past several years. It's going to have to go back to the offense at some point. You're going to have to trust Patrick Mahomes once again to kind of have like a 50 touchdown season. You need to go back to that at some point. And I think after this year, it's evident that that time is probably right around now.
And maybe you can't just do whatever at offensive coordinator. Maybe you can't just hire Matt Nagy off the street and have him call your plays. You got to do something a little bit more. I know Mahomes is great. I know Andy Reid is great, but you got to put a little bit more effort into that offensive coordinator search. I know Bieniemy kind of always got shot down from head coaches for whatever reason and was talked about as if he wasn't great because he wasn't the play caller. But obviously he had an impact in that offense because you can look at how Mahomes' stats dropped off when they switched from Bieniemy to Matt Nagy. So I think that's a big switch we'll see this offseason too. Matt Nagy was getting head coaching interviews during their bye. I think he'll be out as offensive coordinator.
All right, let's shift our focus towards the Eagles, and that's what we'll do when we come back. We'll talk about the legacy, hits, or not really hits. I think it's safe to say a lot of legacies were built and strengthened last night with the Eagles, not just a win, but a dominating win over the Chiefs to win Super Bowl 59. So we'll pick up with that when we come back. We'll shift our focus towards the Eagles. When we return, this is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. just like every day after a championship has been won, whether it's a national championship in college football or basketball or, World Series, NBA Finals, Stanley Cup, it don't matter. We go, I think sometimes we over prop up the winner and just say, hey, the sky's the limit for this team moving forward. But with this being the second Super Bowl appearance in the last 3 years, and they didn't play poorly in the first Super Bowl, and they absolutely dominated in this Super Bowl last night, when you look at the way this team drafts and the way this team attacks free agency and the trade market and the way they handle, roster retention, is it false to say that the Eagles are the blueprint for success in the National Football League? I feel like sometimes they have been so perfect at this that we don't use them as examples because I think it's very hard to attain what they've done. I think we look at the Chiefs and people say, well, it's hard to attain what they've done, but people feel closer because a lot of teams, especially like the Bengals, like you have a Joe Burrow, they have Patrick Mahomes. All right, we're very close to being in position to do what they do. You look at the offensive production of the Bengals. You looked at the offensive production of the Chiefs in years past. All right, we're very close to being able to do what they do. The same thing with the Bills. The same thing with the Ravens. But I still think between the Bengals and the Ravens and the Bills and even the Chiefs at this point, I'm looking at the Eagles and saying, man, all those teams aren't even close to what they're doing over here. Is this sustainable, and how impressive is what the Eagles have been able to do? Because I think they were getting a lot of love even without getting to the Super Bowl, but I think winning and dominating the way they did with so many of their own guys that they've drafted, guys that they've developed, guys that they've invested into, to do it the way that they've done, I can't think of a team in recent history. Even the Patriot way wasn't a well-oiled machine like this. I don't care what anybody says. The Eagles just seem to be the blueprint for what you aspire to be from a franchise production standpoint. It's pretty damn impressive what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, not only is it sustainable, but they've sustained it. I mean, it's like they've done that. They've been able to sustain it. In fact, the only thing that's gone wrong really for the Eagles over the past several years is that they get in their own way. There's drama with Nick Sirianni. There's drama with the wide receiving room. There's drama with Jalen Hurts. Like, that's the only thing that's kind of dismantled them. They were fantastic last year before a trail off that we've never seen before in the history of the sport. Like, I think that the Eagles are the blueprint. I think they're phenomenal. Shout out to Howie. Big Howie got another one last night. And like, you look at the past winners of the Super Bowl, they've won now 2 Super Bowls in the last 8 years. It's hard to do that. It's hard to win one, and they're able to have sustained success. So good for them. They've had one losing season since their last Super Bowl win in 2017. One losing season. After that season, that was the last year of Doug Peterson. Nick Sirianni's been absolutely incredible. So good for him, good for the Eagles. And moving forward, you might be talking about an Eagles dynasty. Because, again, I do think Jalen Hurts is good. You have Saquon Barkley. The defense, the offense, every single part. Jake Elliot was the worst kicker in the NFL last year. Last night, he was absolutely dominant. I mean, he was making kicks exactly down the middle from, I would say, like, if they wanted a 75-yarder last night, Jake Elliott would have made it. Like, that's just how perfect they were. And going forward, I'm going to trust the Philadelphia Eagles, and especially looking at the NFC, how many truly great NFC teams were there this year? I'd argue not that many. I'd argue there weren't a ton of truly spectacular NFC teams.
And out of the good ones, I'd only argue 2 are set up for the future.
That's what I'm saying. And like, I can only say that the teams in the NFC, those teams that were good this year, I can say that they're probably only going to get worse, while the Eagles are still going to be better. So it's good for the Eagles. You can't say enough nice things about how that franchise is being run. Wish we had it here.
7 starters on offense from the draft, 8 starters on defense from the draft.
That's insane.
That's how you can sustain this with a $50 million quarterback, the highest paid running back, and 2 of the highest paid receivers in football. That's how you do it, is you hit in the draft. You get difference makers, and you get them for cheap. And when you realize they're difference makers, you don't wait till their contract is up and the market is as high as possible to extend them. You extend them early and move cap hits around and be flexible with money so you can continue to add to the roster that you drafted and supplement it and become better with guys like A.J. Brown and Saquon Barkley. If you're not extending guys like Devontae Smith and Jalen Hurts early, you can't add big names like that. So that's the other thing the Eagles do so well, is they get guys in the building that are studs, and they get their contracts done early once they recognize they're studs, and they say, hey, we're going to keep you around because they mean so much to them. Casey has a great chart over here that Joe Goodberry posted about the cap hits for some of these superstars. And you can just see the Bengals on the left and the Eagles on the right if you're watching with us on YouTube. And the Eagles just handle their cap hits so much better. These contracts are very similar with what our players are making. Joe Burrow and Jalen Hurts both in that $50+ million range. But as you can see there, Jalen Hurts' contract, only 5.3% of the cap.
That's insane.
Joe Burrow, almost 12%. T. Higgins, obviously a little bit different this year just because that's the franchise tag, but Jamar Chase, even with a higher cap hit than Devontae Smith, when Devontae Smith signed a big money extension and Jamar's on his rookie contract. You can get creative with these contracts, but this is also what's allowed the Bengals a lot of flexibility. If you look to the bottom of that Bengals chart, Alex Kappa, Sam Hubbard, Sheldon Rankins, these are guys we're talking about cutting this year. And since there aren't cap hits spread into the future, we're able to have that conversation about cutting them now without having any money affect us in the future. So though this outdated, antiquated way of making contracts has hurt the Bengals with some of their big names, it's also allowed them to get off of some of their misses in free agency. Because if you look at the Eagles, they missed on Bryce Huff, the edge rusher from the Jets, and James Bradbury, the corner from the Giants. If you remember, James Bradbury actually cost them the Super Bowl against the Chiefs the first time. If the Bengals missed on 2 free agent signings of that big of a money guarantee, they would be screwed for a couple years because of how the Eagles do contracts. But since the Bengals do contracts the way they have, they might struggle to bring in some big names, but it allows them to move off their misses a lot more. So though this might sound like a bad thing, it saved us a little bit. But once you know you have stars that you're not going to move off of, you have to get out of that mold. I think that's what everyone's asking the Bengals to do this year, and that's what we've seen the Eagles do, and that's why they're so good.
Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410 Wing AM in Dayton. While we've been doing this, I just actually kind of thought of this. I know, we talk about the Eagles, Jalen Hurts and company winning their first Super Bowl for a majority of the star players on this roster. But can we classify the Eagles as a dynasty already? Like, a lot of the talk is, well, man, they win a Super Bowl. Could this be a dynasty moving forward? I think we're kind of, I know it sounds weird, but if they won it from 2017 to now. They've been to the Super Bowl 3 times since 2017. They're 2-1 in the Super Bowl since 2017. They've won their division 4 times, and they've done it with multiple quarterbacks, multiple head coaches. This is, as we said, a well-oiled machine, and a lot of teams looking at the Eagles as the blueprint of how, from a front office standpoint, that's what you want to aspire to be. Are the Eagles a dynasty right now? Like, not moving forward. I think they want to continue that moving forward. I think it would be hard to convince anybody that they're not. Again, 3 Super Bowls since 2017, and they're 2-1. They've won their division 4 times in that span, and I don't think there's any signs of them slowing down moving forward. I know the Washington Commanders have a big, their projections moving forward that they're about to kind of take off. Obviously, the Giants have some room to improve, and the Cowboys are a mess. But are the Eagles a dynasty right now?
I don't think so. I think dynasty, I'm pretty hard and fast. It's 3 championships in 5 years. If you don't reach that point, you're not a dynasty to me. You're just a really good team. I think the Eagles have been a really good team for a long time. If they can win 3 in the next 5 years, I guess, starting with this one, then yeah, I'd classify them as a dynasty. But I think you need the 3 championships, at least in my mind, to be a dynasty.
I don't know if you need 3 and 5. Jacob's right. I mean, you have to have, I don't think they're at dynasty level right now. If they win another in the next 3 years, they're a dynasty. That's just what I think. I mean, as of this moment, a dynasty is a lot of success in a short amount of time. They've had that, but it's you have to win maybe 1 more championship. I would say 2 championships in 5 years would be my number, but we're both hovering around the same thing. It's not a dynasty yet, but it's about as good as you could be without being called a dynasty.
I think we have a much more real conversation about whether or not they're a dynasty if that championship was 2019 instead of 2017. I think just it being 7 years away kind of spaces there at least a little bit too much in my mind. Different quarterback, different coaches, different coordinators. I don't know. I think continuity can lessen that 3 of 5. But if Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni and the same crew run it back again next year and repeat, then certainly we can have that conversation about dynasty. But I think since it was such different groups with their first one to this one as well, that kind of hurts that conversation in my eyes.
Well, I mean, for this team, this roster, I understand your point completely, but from an organization standpoint, people think that the Patriots dynasty started 2001 with that Tom Brady, Super Bowl. But I know the Patriots didn't win it in '96. But a lot of people said right when the ownership, why am I drawing a blank on the ownership of the Patriots? Jesus, they're always in the headlines.
Robert
Kraft family, when they took over, I mean, they get to that Super Bowl in '96, and they, have Bill Parcells. We just had Keith Byers on last week. I mean, they got to that Super Bowl. I know that they lost, but that's when the Patriots organization really turned around, and that's when they just started changing up how they've run everything. And then all of a sudden, it was full steam ahead. I'm not saying that 96 Patriots team was a part of that dynasty run for the Patriots, but to Jake's point about, you said, 3 and 5 years?
Yeah, 3 and 5 is my dynasty line.
Then that's fair. But so with the Patriots, a lot of people say, man, for the Patriots are a dynasty for 2 decades. when people say that, it's like, yeah, we looked at the Patriots. They were a dynasty for almost 2 decades with a lot of different parts moving in and out and going throughout. I think, it's one thing to be a dynasty with the main core pieces throughout, like Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. But I think what the Eagles have done is even more impressive because the quarterbacks have changed. The head coaches have changed. The only thing that has not changed is the organizational structure. And I guess that's why I'm still beyond impressed with the Eagles from that perspective. It's different, but that's why I looked at it from in that way.
I couldn't be more impressed with the Eagles. I'm not saying I'm not impressed with the Eagles. The first thing, I am a Jalen Hurts hater, so obviously wasn't going to congratulate him first, but the first thing I tweeted after that game ended was Howie Roseman take a bow, because that's who won that championship. It was Howie Roseman. I mean, you saw Milton Williams get 2 sacks. You saw Josh Sweat be a difference maker off the edge the entire game. Cooper DeJean falls to pick 40. You jump on it even though you took a corner in the first round. You just draft value. You don't matter. It doesn't matter where they play. And he gets a pick 6 on his birthday in the Super Bowl. Howie Roseman won that Super Bowl. Howie Roseman should have been the Super Bowl MVP. I don't know how that would work, but he should have won it because he's been absolutely phenomenal with building this roster. He's the executive of the year by a mile. He's the executive of the decade. We've never seen a team built like this. I didn't think super teams in the NFL were possible. This is as close as you're going to get. You have the best offensive line. You have the best pass rush. You have one of the best line. You have an all-pro linebacker, and then his backup, Warren Burks, comes in and plays at a damn good level for 3 games. The corners have been unbelievable. Quinyon Mitchell finished second for Defensive Rookie of the Year. Darius Slay is still Darius Slay to a degree, and Cooper DeJean is one of the best nickels in football. I mean, the safeties have played at a high level. It's unbelievable what they've built in Philadelphia on this roster. Howie Roseman is one of the best GMs, if not the best GM of all time for what he's been able to build. I know Robert Kraft and Bill Belichick get a lot of credit for what they built in New England. Those teams were awesome. Those teams, top to bottom roster-wise, other than the one that lost to the Giants, were not as good as this Eagles team, not in terms of every single position.
Yeah, it's a dangerous thing to say. I'm more impressed with the Eagles than the Patriots. I just think it's a lot more difficult to continue. And the Patriots had moving parts, don't get me wrong, but the 2 most important pieces, your head coach and your quarterback, right, to build around those 2 moving throughout. And the Eagles have just had so many moving parts at the most important pieces. They've had, there was drama of when they drafted Jalen Hurts. Why would you draft Jalen Hurts? Carson Wentz has been playing great. That was the right decision. And then moving on from Carson Wentz. Why would you move on from Carson Wentz? And then Jalen Hurts goes and he leads them to a Super Bowl and then 2 Super Bowls in 3 years. And then they win this one and not just win it, dominate it. And they did it against the current dynasty that is the Kansas City Chiefs, of course. But the legacy conversation, let's start with the Eagles on the Saquon Barkley front. Obviously, leaving New York, leaving a dumpster fire situation there. We knew it was a big move. Saquon going to Philadelphia, we knew it was going to be a big move. I didn't think it was going to be this drastic of a move. I mean, it was the complete difference of reshifting this offense and balancing out this offense. The legacy of Saquon after this Super Bowl win last night for you is what?
Well, the irony of it all is signing Saquon Barkley absolutely got them to a Super Bowl. I still make it out. It was the best signing of last season. Yep. Saying that, and we said it like last Friday or last Thursday, he wasn't the reason they won that game.
I would argue he was.
I mean, maybe I don't think it was.
They had 7 guys in the box, like 60% of the snaps.
That's fair. But at the end of the day, 25 for 57, like it wasn't a great statistical performance. Saying all that, he was as important to the Eagles this year as Patrick Mahomes is to the Chiefs. Like that's how important he was. An incredible signing. His legacy goes up a billion. He's the number 1 running back in the NFL. I don't think it's close. He probably had.
He's the number 1 running back in the NFL?
Right now he is, yeah.
Legacy-wise or just this season?
Legacy-wise.
No way.
You don't think so?
No way. He has 7,000 yards. Derrick Henry has 10.
See, but
it's not even close.
Yeah, I
think 10,000 yards is a very hard point in running back legacy debate, and Saquon won't get there.
That's fair. I mean, we'll see. We'll see what happens next year, but I
guess if he goes 2K again, he will.
I bet a lot of money. I'd bet a lot of money Saquon wins another Super Bowl because that's how good he is. He had maybe the play of the year with the backwards hurdle. We're going to see that play for decades to come. But it's why you pay a good running back. It's why you have your organization structured the way the Eagles do, like Jacob just said. So you can pay a guy like that and have him essentially carry your roster. Jalen Hurts, again, I don't think Jacob is respecting Hurts enough.
I don't think people are understanding my Jalen Hurts take, and I think we'll get into it later.
Yeah, maybe.
It's not a complete disrespect.
Jalen Hurts is incredible. Jalen Hurts, this cemented him as one of the best quarterbacks in the league. If you had any doubts about that, you take a look at what they did in that Super Bowl last night. He was absolutely phenomenal. He wins the Super Bowl MVP. But yes, in regards to your question about Saquon Barkley, In my opinion, he's right now the greatest running back in the NFL, and that's why you pay him. So the Giants are looking like morons right about now.
That's where I disagree with a lot of people in the Saquon conversation. I don't think the Giants are looking that stupid. I understand he had 2,000 rushing yards. I understand he was really good for the Eagles. But the Giants are picking 4th, and if they had Saquon Barkley, they're picking, 6th? Like, he gets them 1 or 2 wins.
You're right about that, and that's where the argument kind of has, a gray area. I still think you're if the Luka trade ends up kind of working out, let's say Anthony, and this is a kind of crazy comparison. Let's say the Anthony Davis thing works out, right? Yeah. Anthony Davis helps them maybe they don't win a championship, they get to a championship, but it objectively works. It works. They still are going to look like morons if Luka ever does anything over there. You can look like a moron and still be the right move.
I think it's different in football, and if Saquon had went somewhere that wasn't as set up for success. If Saquon had went to Oakland and torn it up, or Vegas, I guess, and torn it up for the Raiders. But, he's playing behind a great O-line. I'm not taking anything away from Saquon, but I don't think he's having a 2,000-yard season in New York. He only had 2,000 or 3,000-yard seasons in New York in 5 years. So I don't know that it's as bad on the Giants as a lot of people are saying, but Saquon's been incredible. I think this year the running back conversation has changed drastically, but I think that change is being misconstrued a little bit. The running backs that we've seen succeed in free agency for big money, Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, all succeeded at massive levels. So maybe the top 3 running backs in the league this year. All 3 of those teams were ready-made contenders, at least to a degree, to compete for a Super Bowl and be a good playoff team. I don't think running backs are swinging the needle still for teams picking in the top 5, top 10 of the draft. I think they're a perfect addition to your roster, and if you set up your roster the way Howie Roseman and the Eagles did, you can go sign a great running back like Saquon for big money to be that addition. I think they're perfect for that, and I think that's how teams should address them. I don't think these star running backs are really moving the needle for bad teams, even though I think that's where the conversation's moving a little bit now.
That's a good way to put. I actually haven't thought of it like that, but you were right. It's not like if you're a bad team and you add Saquon, all of a sudden you're a good team. Look at the Giants. They weren't able to do anything with Saquon. I know they made the playoffs with Daniel Jones, don't get me wrong, but it's like you could tell there was still a gap there of where they wanted to go. The Titans obviously were a 1 seed years ago when the Bengals got to the Super Bowl that year, but you could tell there was even a ceiling there with Derrick Henry being their best player. Derrick Henry needing to go to the Ravens to take them over the top, and that's what the hope was. What the Eagles did this year is what the Ravens were hoping would have happened over there, and it still can. It sounds like Derrick Henry wants to go back and stay in Baltimore. But you're right. I don't think these huge running backs going to bad teams is going to move the needle, but these are great cherries on top. And the other, real quick, Elliot, too, I don't know how much it does for Saquon only from this standpoint. The Eagles were just here in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, and the Eagles were a play away from beating the Chiefs in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. We could almost be talking about this team picking up their second Super Bowl last night if that call doesn't happen late in that Super Bowl against the Chiefs the first time. So, yes, a ton of props to Saquon, but at the same time, this team was already a very, very good team. You just added a dominant weapon on top of it thanks to the front office. So I think there's that way to look at it too.
You can. I'd argue, and this is where I think it kind of the Giants look like fools, not signing a generational talent, regardless of how good your team is. You guys are right. It's a game. A running back is as good as the game script. If you are losing by 10 points in a game, the running back's just not going to probably be involved as much as he would be as if you were up 10. Therefore, if you were a bad team, a running back's not going to help you a ton. Here's where they look like fools. Not signing a generational talent, have him go to a division rival, and that team then win a Super Bowl on the back of your guy who you just didn't sign.
Especially when your teenage son told you to sign him.
Yeah, correct. That's where they look like fools. I'm not saying it wasn't even the right decision to let him walk, but the fact that he goes out and he goes to a division rival and then he wins the Super Bowl that year, you look like fools. You do. You look like a world-class failure of an organization. But it's good for Saquon Barkley. I don't think you're wrong either, Kinner. Yeah, they have a good roster, and that's a part of it. But you can't say that the Eagles are where they are without Saquon. You can't sit here and say that they made the Super Bowl if they had Boston Scott or whoever they were throwing out there before. You can't say that. Kenneth Gainwell and Boston Scott does not get the Philadelphia Eagles to the Super Bowl.
Fair enough. All right, we'll pick up with – I want to talk about Nick Sirianni, and I want to talk Jalen Hurts when we come back. And then I want to transition over to the Cincinnati Bengals. They put out an interesting hype video that has a lot of Bengals fans talking. There's one observation I made about that hype video that I want to dive into as a possible indicator of where the Bengals' priorities are heading into this offseason. And you guys could tell me if I'm wrong or not. I usually am. So we'll get to that coming up. It's Hype Video Monday because the Reds released, actually, they technically released it last night, the second the Super Bowl was done. A Terry Francona, voiceover hype video was released by the Cincinnati Reds as well. We have a couple Reds things to dive into, moving forward as well. So we'll be right back. More Off the Bench when we come back. I'm mad that you guys said you liked my Bengals take, and that's off-air content. That's behind-the-scenes content. It was actually a pro Bengals take, and I saved that content for off the air. Apparently,
That's right.
We'll get to the Bengals coming up in a moment. We want to be back off the bench. Justin Kinner, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett, Casey McAllister. Super Bowl reaction Monday, of course. Real quick, I'm curious your guys' thoughts. Did this Super Bowl just feel weird to you? The NBA dominated the week of headlines. I think that played some role in it too. But do you think that the hype for this Super Bowl was as big as it's been in years past? It was not a good game. I don't think the game was good. There's a lot that came out of it, as always does out of a Super Bowl. But where are you guys at with this Super Bowl? I thought the build up to it was kind of blah. I just thought these playoffs were kind of weird in general. I don't know. It just didn't feel the same. I know probably record viewership when it's all said and done. But am I wrong? Maybe it's just me. Did this feel like a weird Super Bowl for you guys?
I think the general hatred for both of the teams playing and nationwide kind of played that up a little bit. You don't want to talk about it. You don't want to listen to it. You don't want to hear about the Chiefs versus the Eagles because then that means one of those two teams has to win the Super Bowl. And most people didn't want either of those outcomes for the entirety of the regular season and the playoffs. So I think that definitely played into a little bit. I don't know. I think it looked like a great time. Everything I saw from Radio Row and Bourbon Street, it looked like New Orleans is one of the best host cities in the entire country for an event like that. It looked like everyone had a phenomenal time, and for the most part stayed safe. So it looked like they did a great job in terms of the city and the event they put on. But yeah, nationwide, I didn't feel necessarily the same, and I do just think it's because most people hate the Eagles and the Chiefs.
Yeah, it was solely because you don't have a rooting interest. It's like you can root against Patrick Mahomes, but then you're rooting for the city of Philadelphia. No disrespect to the city of Philadelphia.
They do it to themselves.
I just like to root for the underdog. And as we've just said, they're no longer an underdog. They're a well-run organization. The Phillies are good. Every team they've got is good. So except for the Sixers, ironically. But I think that it was a Super Bowl that nobody could root for the underdog. Everybody wants to root for that underdog. When the 2-1 seeds go at it, it's hard to just sit there and say, yeah, this is going to be fun. And not to mention, it was the worst Super Bowl ever as well. That game stunk. The fact that the Chiefs get awarded with the fact that they get to show that they scored 22 points is a disgrace to the sport because they did not score 22 points. Every point didn't count. Every statistic didn't count. They were an abomination to the sport of football.
Yeah, and look, and last week, too, the purpose of Radio Row is just to provide as many media outlets across the country with opportunities to get some of the biggest names in sports and celebrities on to hype up the Super Bowl. I don't know about you guys, and again, maybe it became very regionalized because of the big offseason for the Bengals coming up. And maybe it has something to do with that. I think that the offseason for your teams coming up seem bigger than the Super Bowl this year because of the lack of interest in those particular teams. But I felt like last week was just Radio Row dedicated to nothing but offseason talk. Where's Aaron Rodgers going to go? What are the Bengals going to do this offseason? You know, Myles Garrett. I mean, it was Myles Garrett and Joe Burrow. They owned Radio Row last week. Like, and maybe we just feel that way because those are the two teams here in the state of Ohio that get talked about the most. But I don't think that to be the case because Joe Burrow was all over First Take, as was Myles Garrett, all over the Fox national shows. I don't know. I just felt like last week was just a big, I call it the preseason to offseason. It was the pre-off season, if that's what you want to call it. That's what Radio Row felt like. That's supposed to be to build up the Super Bowl. I don't feel like that was the case. But either way, it's fine. I just thought the build up to this was kind of strange. But you guys already touched on that as far as that goes. But
it was just, there was one story. There was one storyline. Will the Chiefs three-peat? And that's a story that I am not interested in reading.
I also think with how aware people are now on what content plays. Are the Chiefs going to three-peat 5 days in a row? Or Joe Burrow talking about how much he needs to sign his players? Or Myles Garrett talking about a trade request? I think all that stuff's more interesting nationwide, star players talking about roster construction, than it is to just say, I think Patrick Mahomes is really good. Because every time we say that on this show, the chat comes and kills us, even though he's won 3 Super Bowls in 5 years.
Do you guys have a favorite Super Bowl commercial? I thought they all sucked last night.
I think I've had a take for a couple years now. I think Super Bowl commercials are indistinguishable at this point.
I agree.
Celebrity cameos are the only thing that sets them apart from normal commercials. They used to be quality.
They used to have creative commercials that everybody cared about. It's not that anymore. I only had 2 that I liked. The Tim Robinson one at the very end was very funny, and I like the Seal one. Seal as a Seal made me laugh. That's a good bit.
The Jeep one with Harrison Ford was good.
That was, but it's not funny. Like, it was good, but it was, I like the funny ones better. I know there's good ones that aren't funny, like I'll never forget the puppy being friends with the horse for the Budweiser.
Yeah.
Like, there's good ones that aren't. I need a little bit of creativity there, and I just feel like Super Bowl commercials have gone downhill.
Like, for the first 2 or 3 commercial breaks, I was on my phone.
Yeah.
And then I would come back to the game, I'd put my phone in my pocket like I always do when I watch sports, and then I was like, shoot, man, it's the Super Bowl. I'm supposed to be watching these commercials. Like, I just don't care anymore. I used to care.
Yeah, not to mention they leak them all.
I see them on Twitter.
If you leak your Super Bowl commercial, you're a loser. You're a loser. That's terrible.
So, and there's 2 different thoughts of that. You get more play out of pre-releasing your Super Bowl commercial, like the behind the scenes. So my favorite one, even though I don't think it's a generational commercial by any means. I don't know the last generational commercial there was in the Super Bowl, but the Shane Gillis and Post Malone, Peyton Manning, with the Bud Light commercial. I thought that one was the most entertaining to me. That one always got my attention. I'm a huge Shane Gillis fan, and Post Malone's just goofy as hell. And then you got Peyton Manning in there too, and they're just shooting beers at everybody out of all the lawn equipment. So I thought that was the most entertaining one. But that one, I almost don't want to count it because to Elliot's point, they were releasing them throughout the week. I wanted to be sitting there not knowing what's coming up next and have a commercial just grab my attention. I don't think any of them did that. The Harrison Ford one was cool. There were some cool ones. I just didn't think any of the commercials grabbed my attention at the end.
The Jeremy Strong one was funny too. I'll give that one some credit. It was with God, I'm gonna forget the actor's name. Who's the friend with Matt Damon? Ben Affleck. It was the Ben Affleck. I think it was a Dunkin' commercial, and Jeremy Strong was in the pot of coffee. He was playing the pot of coffee. It was very funny. Those were it.
Again, if you're just joining us, by the way, if you're watching right now on YouTube, hit the like button below. We really appreciate that. That helps us grow the show. Again, a lot of Super Bowl talk today. We're going to transition over to the Bengals coming up here shortly, but just kind of the legacy conversation. So, Elliot, you brought up a good point earlier. It's like the only thing people really cared about this Super Bowl was, can the Chiefs three-peat? But I feel like a whole new light has been shined on the Eagles organization. We always knew there was a possibility of the Eagles winning this, but I think it felt like if they win it, so what? Like if, Jalen Hurts, if he wins it, it's going to be Saquon's Super Bowl and defense's Super Bowl, but that's not what happened. Saquon last night Jalen Hurts last night ended up for the second straight Super Bowl that he goes up against the Chiefs outplaying Patrick Mahomes. He outplayed Patrick Mahomes for the second straight Super Bowl, had almost 300 combined total yards, 3 touchdowns. He had an ugly interception early that I thought, Jake's going to love that one. But he played like he made some very tough throws the rest of the way just to continue adding on. The defense complemented his play perfectly. But I think, what did Jalen Hurts do last night for you, Jacob? Because a lot of people jumped onto what you said last week. I even was kind of tilting my head a little bit. I do not think Jalen Hurts. I would not take Jalen Hurts over Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, or Joe Burrow. I'm not even saying I would put him 5th, But it's a definitive no to taking him over any of those four. You can convince me with a lot of other quarterbacks in the NFL at this point. But what did he do for you? What did he do legacy-wise? I'm not putting him over any of those top four, as I just mentioned, but I think he did a lot to get people's attention as far as how they view him, because the lights never get too bright. It's not like he plays great in the regular season and then his play dissipates in the postseason. It's like he elevates in the postseason, and that's a rare thing to have. You guys have that with Joe Burrow, and the Eagles definitely have that with Jalen Hurts. I thought he was lights out last night, and I think he probably did the most for his legacy, because he could have just been a quarterback throwing for 180 yards, 210 yards, and a touchdown and a pick, and the Eagles win a Super Bowl, and we'd be talking about Saquon or someone else. They won that last night because of a lot of things. That defense, no doubt. But Jalen Hurts was lights out last night, and I don't think we could deny that.
Yeah, he was really good, and quite honestly, he did something I didn't think he was capable of doing, and that's push the ball downfield without a consistent rushing attack. It's not something we've seen him do in his career, but last night he did do something we've seen him do his entire career, and that's pick people apart when he has great protection. He's always been a great downfield passer when he's had elite protection, and we saw one time when he had a hand in his face, he underthrew a deep ball by about 20 yards. So I've never thought Jalen Hurts wasn't a good quarterback. If you go back and watch the clip, I said he's not top 15, and I think if he wins the Super Bowl, people are going to be putting him in top 5 and top 10 conversation, and that's not where he belongs. I still sit right about the same spot. I will concede that he is a top 15 quarterback with how he played on Sunday night. I have him somewhere in that 12, 13, 14 range. I think there's a lot of quarterbacks that can do what he's done if they were on the Philadelphia Eagles. And the worry with him winning is what we saw last night right after it happened. And it was Ryan Clark who tweeted after the game about Jalen Hurts and where he stands with these other quarterbacks. And he said, Josh, Joe, and Lamar have all had their shots at the throne. Joe beat Patrick, and Josh has had his days, but none of them have stood across from 15 like Jalen Hurts. Maybe he's not mentioned in the same breath as the others, but now he's in a convo. Just him and Patrick are in. Super Bowl MVP. And while that is statistically true and factually true with the Super Bowl MVP, this is exactly what I was talking about. People injecting Jalen Hurts into that top 4, top 5 conversation with those other elite quarterbacks when that's just not the case. Has he stood across from Patrick Mahomes better than everyone else? Sure, you could say that. Has he also had the best offensive line, the best defense, the best rushing attack, and the second best duo of receivers in those matchups? Yes, I don't think anyone would argue with that. So I think Jalen Hurts is a fine starting quarterback. I just think a lot of starting quarterbacks in the NFL could have success and win Super Bowls and get to Super Bowls with the help he has in Philadelphia. Now, I think he's a phenomenal leader, and I think that matters a ton with a coach like Nick Sirianni. I don't think Nick Sirianni's a great leader. I think he's a pretty good X's and O's guy offensively, but, I mean, they hired Big Dom, so we won't fight as players. So I think Jalen Hurts is a great, great leader in that locker room. I think he does a lot for the city of Philadelphia. I think he does a lot for the team off the field. When it comes to playing quarterback, the 3 games to get here, he averaged 160 passing yards. So I just don't think he's a world beater, and that's definitely the conversation he's getting into now.
Wouldn't you say that Mahomes is the recipient of also having one of the best coaches in the NFL, one of the best defenses in the NFL, some of the best offensive line play over the years, some of the best wide receiving talent, pass catching talent
I don't think
over
he
the
has
past
had
couple of
great
years?
pass catching talent.
I mean, he had Tyreek Hill. I mean,
One of his 3 Super Bowls.
Yeah, but that count. I mean, that count. Like this
Yeah,
is
so
this
the
is,
other 2.
Well, this is one of the super. My point is if Jalen Hurts goes, because I think there's a lot of quarterbacks that could have been on the Chiefs this year and done what Patrick Mahomes did, and that's not.
I think the Chiefs are a 7-10 team without Patrick Mahomes.
Maybe, and you could make that argument. We'll never know. It's the fun about hypotheticals. I'm just saying, like if Jalen Hurts wins another next year, he's in the same exact boat as Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, I couldn't disagree more.
But Patrick Mahomes for one of his Super Bowls has had what you're saying.
And he has 2 other Super Bowls. He has a 5,000-yard passing season in regular season. He has 2 MVPs. Patrick Mahomes.
But I'm saying it could still happen. Like next year, if he goes out and wins, Jalen Hurts being, I think that you can't take away from him because of the situation.
Yeah, at some point we're gonna have to have that discussion. But this reminds me a lot of the discussion we had earlier this week about Eli Manning and the Hall of Fame, or I guess last week. And he's a 2-time Super Bowl MVP. I don't think Eli Manning's a Hall of Famer. So I mean, Jalen Hurts played a great game. They had a great run. They have a great team. We'll see how much he can do it again. Well, I mean, obviously the rankings of quarterbacks are incredibly fluent. We've seen that on this show multiple times, and he can obviously move up. But as of now, I think he's pretty comfortably outside the top 10, at least in my eyes.
And that's like I think he's in the top 10. I have
him 11 or 12.
I think he's absolutely in the top 10, probably right around 5. Maybe not in the top 5, but he's right around 5. If he's not there yet, and I think next year it'll see if he gets to the Super Bowl again, he wins another Super Bowl, then we have another conversation, because you couldn't possibly put Joe Burrow or Josh Allen or Lamar in that conversation if he has 2 Super Bowls and 2 Super Bowl MVPs.
For sure. Yeah. No, you're right.
I always think it's a slippery slope when we hold weapons of these quarterbacks against them. Now, it sounds hypocritical because I'm always a do more with less guy. I always prop up the Josh Allens because I don't think he has the weapons that the other elite quarterbacks in this league do. And that's why I was fine with him winning MVP. But then I'm also a hypocrite because I'll look at Joe Burrow and others and say, well, you're only good because of your weapons, which I don't think Joe Burrow's only good because of his weapons, but I think his job's easier because of his weapons. Jake, what would have happened if 2-3 years ago? Wow, it has been a minute since that Super Bowl. I keep feeling like it was just last year. If Joe Burrow wins that Super Bowl in 21, and people, and what would you say to people like what you're doing to Jalen Hurts? What would you say to people that say, well, Joe Burrow had Joe Mixon, who was top 3 in rushing that year. He has Tyler Boyd, he has T. Higgins, and he has Jamar Chase. And the defense, I know statistically for the overall season was very average, but in the postseason, I mean, they were forcing turnovers. They were getting to the cornerback. They were not, I mean, they were an elite defense in the postseason. And then, of course, the special teams unit, of course, obviously with Money Mac. Why is it okay for you to do that to Jalen Hurts? But I know you would have probably had a problem with people did it to you.
If the Bengals in 2021 had one member of this Eagles offensive line, we would have that conversation because we'd be Super Bowl champions.
They had the worst offensive line in the history of the sport. I want to say
Burrow's got sacked 9 times against Tennessee.
I want to say that offensive line unit that we ran out for the Super Bowl and any Super Bowl ever, that is the single worst offensive line unit. And Joe Burrow, like Joe Burrow last night, he would have been able to. I don't know if they would have won the game. They would have been able to not lose by 50. Like Joe Burrow's used to that by now. Like he's never had a good offensive line. When I say good, I mean like 5 serviceable guys at the same time. He's never once had that.
If we say Jalen Hurts is a back of the top 10 quarterback, I mean that's conceding 8 or 9. He's the worst unit on their team.
Oh yeah,
they have a top 5 wide receiving core, a top 5 running back, a top 5 offensive line, a top 5 defensive line, top 5 linebackers, top 5 corners, and top 5 safeties. Like
that's like,
it's
and the Bengals defense too. Like I do think like if like the Bengals defense that year is like what the Chiefs kind of were this year. They were solid. They did their job. But at the end of the day, like you didn't believe in the Bengals defense. I certainly don't believe in the Bengals defense.
That's why I said not the full season, but the Bengals defense in that postseason was not the same defense from the regular season. I don't think they even get to the AFC Championship game if that defense is what it was in the regular season. I think, can we all agree that they flipped a switch in the postseason? I think that was the Anarumo. That was the Anarumo thing that kept him around longer than probably you guys should have kept him around, is because I think people still remember what he was able to do with that unit years ago. But either way, look, this happens with everyone. I mean, Tom Brady, you know, obviously he never had Randy Moss was the best pass catcher he played with at wide receiver throughout his time in New England, and it wasn't like he had an embarrassment of riches at wide receiver. Every quarterback is going to have their deficiency that they have to play through. I will say what we learned about Patrick Mahomes this year, though. Because they've been dominant for so long, we just assume, he doesn't have deficiencies. We have learned, the Super Bowls have taught us, if he doesn't have a good offensive line, he can't do what Joe Burrow does, and that's overcome bad offensive lines. Joe Burrow put up an MVP caliber season this year with an improved offensive line from years past, but that's like saying I wake up tomorrow 5'8". I'm taller than I was today, but I'm not tall. The offensive line wasn't good for the Cincinnati Bengals this year, even though it's been better than in years past. Joe Burrow could play. That's one great thing about him, is he has not let that impact his play. Although it's gotten in the way of the team's success, hasn't gotten in the way of him. Patrick Mahomes is non-existent if he does not have that up front. I think the Chiefs have been telling us that for years. We've done this whole, they're investing in their number one investment in obviously Patrick Mahomes. I think it's because in practice they see, he kind of stinks if you don't have a good offensive line in front of him. That maybe is not the case, obviously, for Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I think that it's a little bit different conversation with Joseph and the rest of these quarterbacks because – Josh Allen has had elite talent at times. And don't get me wrong, Joe Burrow's had, you're right, Kinner, he's had elite offensive weapons. But outside of that, I'd argue he hasn't had a ton. Else. He had a really good kicker for that playoff run. Had a very good kicker for that playoff run. So we'll give Evan McPherson some love. But, the defense has been woeful. The offensive line has been terrible in terms of standards that would be set by every other franchise. So it's not even in the same sentence, or it's not even in the same.
But if he could play well without it, we can't only use it when things don't go well to bail him out of not succeeding, right? Like if he got to a Super Bowl getting sacked 70 times, and I'm not saying you ignored offensive line deficiencies moving forward, but we can't only use offensive line deficiencies to bail him out of not accomplishing what you guys expect him to. You know what I mean? And then when he does succeed, it's
you're losing me a little bit just because I think that again the offensive line being truly, this is not an understatement. It was the worst offensive line unit in the history of the sport.
Like, I think that's the only reason we didn't win that Super Bowl was the offensive line. So why would that not be a constraint the rest of his career?
Because if they win that Super Bowl, you're saying, yes, he won it in spite of the offensive line, but he won the Super Bowl. And if he doesn't win the Super Bowl, it's like, oh, man, he just doesn't have enough help. It's like, well, he had enough help. He was good enough to get to the Super Bowl. He was good enough to win all these games in spite of the offensive line. The offensive line needs to be better. I'm just saying, like, we can't just only use the offensive line as an excuse when he doesn't win, but when he wins, act like everything's hunky-dory.
I think that's for most things, right? Like, if you overcome it, it's a positive, and if it causes you to lose, then it's a deficiency.
Yeah. I
Are
think
you
that's,
giving Patrick Mahomes the benefit of the doubt for losing last night? You've taken him all out of the GOAT conversation.
The last two Super Bowls he won, when he's won without weapons, we said he's overcome having less than stellar receivers. And then this year, we said the lack of receivers is why they lost.
Now this
Or one
was
of the reasons why they lost.
The old Kinner. This is where we would start to argue, you know.
Okay.
But the new, older, mature Kinner is where I say we'll agree to disagree, and I'll still be friends moving forward because I like you guys, and I don't want to lose y'all. I don't want to lose the show and you as friends. So there you go. But we got off track. My bad. Last thing on the Eagles here, Sirianni. Where's he at? What do you do? Head coach that's coach through adversity. He has all the pressure on his shoulders. It's kind of funny if the parallels between him and Ryan Day. I mean, these guys were both fired, 2 months to go in the season, and now all of a sudden they're hoisting up trophies at the end, right? Like, where are we at with Sirianni as far as how he stacks up with the best coaches in the NFL? Because I think he won 9 games his first season. But he went 14-3, 11-6, and 14-3 in his last 3 seasons. I mean, all the guy does is win. The guy's a hell of a coach, but where does he stack up against the great coaches in the NFL? I think because he's not likable, I don't think he's going to get propped up that high. But how do you guys feel about Sirianni?
I think
He's a top 5 active coach.
Yeah, I mean, you have to give him some respect. I mean, the guy's done.
It's better than I thought. Good.
Yeah. He's done everything you could possibly do. Like whatever your dreams were when you hired him, he's accomplished it. Like he's
More.
been more. I mean, 2 Super Bowl appearances. He's been absolutely phenomenal. Won one of them. Like you literally can't ask for more if you're Philadelphia. Now they did ask for more out of Doug when Peterson won a Super Bowl. Like he didn't have a long leash there. So we'll see what Sirianni does, and there's been so much drama. I would want Nick Sirianni, that's for sure. If the Bengals fired Zach Taylor, I would want Nick Sirianni.
I will say the only times Nick Sirianni has really been great and gotten to 2 Super Bowls, he's lost his coordinators. Obviously, that means they're good enough to be hired for head coaches. The first time they lost to the Chiefs, obviously they hired the guy to the Colts, and then Jonathan Gannon went to the Cardinals, and now all the reports are that they're losing Kellen Moore to the Saints. So top-end coordinators both times. And then, again, I think that's a positive to Sirianni for being able to replace those guys with other top-end coordinators. We see a lot how, not being able to replace coordinators sets coaches back. He's done a great job with that and getting those hires right. We saw what happened last year when he got those hires wrong, and he was able to move off of them and make a change. I think he's definitely a top 5 coach in football. I think you have to either say that he's the top 5 coach or you have to say Jalen Hurts is a top 5 quarterback. I think you have to fall in one of those camps because either one of those guys is doing it with a less than stellar coach or one of those guys is doing it with a less than stellar quarterback. So whichever way you fall on one of those, you have to support the other one.
Well, the good thing for you as Bengals fans is this. The trend of coaches on the hot seat, like to win a championship, you need to have a coach on the hot seat. Like Ryan Day was on the hot seat, won a national championship. You look at Sirianni on the hot seat, he wins a Super Bowl. The good thing for you, you have one of the biggest keys to winning a Super Bowl next year. Yes, Joe Burrow, but secondly, a coach on the hot seat. We'll see if that trend continues. And by the way, that doesn't bode well for Buckeye fans in college football because James Franklin could be the year of James Franklin and Zach Taylor. Remember this day, the day after this Super Bowl, because we could go back to this clip a year from now. We saw Ryan Day and, of course, Sirianni, hot seat coaches, win championships. It could be James Franklin and Zach Taylor next year.
I don't hate that take. I mean, both those teams are
yeah.
championship contenders in their respective sport.
But all right, speaking of the Bengals, they put out a hype video. What the hell is there to be hyped about? This seems like it's doom and gloom in Cincinnati, but the whole purpose of a hype video is to get you to be hyped. Did it work? We're gonna watch that video when we come back and get the guys' reaction when we return. This is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. All right, Justin Kinner, Casey McAllister, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett with you here. This is Off the Bench. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate my matureness in that last segment? I channeled the rage that was
pretty good.
And I was like, no,
I mean, it was a long break because we screamed at each other for 5 minutes.
Yes.
But I mean, we got it out of the system off air. We're getting better.
8 out of 10. 8 out of 10.
So our fearless leader, Trace Fowler, hired a therapist for the show. And anytime we start to feel a little anxious with one another, we go and see that therapist. And then he's been helping us throughout the last couple of weeks, and it's worked. No blow-ups.
I think that's HIPAA. I don't think you can talk about my therapist.
Yeah,
I think that's
right.
HIPAA.
Oh, well, I mean,
That's a violation.
The guy tells me everything that you guys say. So there you go.
That's definitely HIPAA.
Oh yeah. But sorry that my fake therapist, violated your. All right, Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. So, by the way, is it baseball season or is all your attention towards baseball or college basketball? I feel like basketball and baseball are like a tug of war right now today. Obviously, the NBA is ongoing. College basketball is about to get to March, which is the biggest time of year. But I feel like baseball keeps putting this thing out where it's like it's baseball season now, and then college basketball is like we're next. And pay attention to us. It is weird. Baseball and college basketball, a little tug of war action happening right now.
It's college basketball for me. College basketball gets a month here. It's February 10th. They get until the end of March, and then it's baseball season. So college basketball gets a little bit of a run here, and then we'll switch. But pitchers and catchers do report today. So the baseball season is upon us. The Reds are, they've got some momentum. I don't know what the momentum is, but they've got it. So let's hope they have a good season. I'm not completely thinking about them yet. That's for Craig and Nick on Chatterbox Reds, but I will say, I'll get there
Chatterbox
eventually.
Reds live tonight at 9 p.m. to talk about pitchers and catchers.
That's right. So tune in for that. But we're college basketball right now.
It's an exciting time.
I'm not college basketball yet.
Not yet?
No, it's combine for about 3 weeks till the end of February, and then it's college basketball.
I like that.
At the start of conference championship week.
No, you're right. And by the way, nothing hypes up Reds fans more than scrap heap spring training invite guys, to talk about for the next month and a half.
People forget Mike Ford saved our season last year.
A lot of people
tried to.
A lot of people try to forget that, and they don't remember it because they should. What a legend that guy was.
Scrap heap guys have always been pretty. I mean, Scooter Jeanette was one of my favorite scrap heaps. I mean, there's been quite a few over the years.
Yeah.
But so it's hype video season apparently, because the second the Super Bowl ended, all these teams and sports had all these hype videos to catch your attention. And we'll talk about the Reds hype video to close out the show in a bit. But the Bengals put out one. Look, we know that how important this offseason is for the Bengals. They have not 1, not 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 question marks. They have a lot of questions that need answered. I think the biggest, obviously we know Jamar Chase. We've talked about that. Trey Hendrickson, T. Higgins. I mean, Joe Burrow goes on this media tour last week to talk about the importance of keeping your guys. But we're all trying to read the tea leaves and pick up on the direction of, what direction the Bengals are going to go in this offseason. Well, they kind of told all Bengals fans how they're going to approach this offseason, but pay very close attention to the guys that are highlighted in this. Everyone's highlighted in it to some degree, but you could tell there's a little bit more emphasis on some than the other. Take a look. Here's the Bengals hype video that they released earlier this morning, and I want to know, does it get you hyped for the offseason? Take a look.
Bengals end the season with a 5-game winning streak. I believe they're still in the Super Bowl window. The DNA is still there.
Last season was one we'll never forget. Remember when the season goals were set? Kings of the North, a homecoming trip, winning Houday Nation a championship. Yet, when the helmet goes on, only plays matter. Not a script. So we'll remember the one-score blows when adversity grows. Moments that we use to grow.
I think we'll learn a lot about who we have in the locker room, the guys that we can count on going forward.
But don't forget when Uno did his thing.
Caught by Chase, and he is gone.
When we crowned Trey the sack king.
Big players make big plays when the games are on the line.
With echoing chants. So we won't forget the close calls, the fourth quarter brawls, how we as Bengals stood tall.
That is coffin nail.
We won't keep just the good and forget the bad. Growth comes from the journey, not the experiences we've had. We'll hit the offseason with all we've got. fueled by our past, we'll rewrite the plot. And when we're back on that field with our purpose reset, we'll be ready for what comes next.
Rule the offseason, rule the jungle. One of the key lines in there, we're going to hit the offseason with everything we got. Now, maybe, I don't think I'm stirring the pot, but it is an observation. It was a lot, obviously a lot of Joe Burrow, obviously. A ton of Uno. They highlighted Uno a lot in there. A lot of Trey Hendrickson. And there was one clip in passing of T catching a ball in the end zone, and that was it. Am I reading too much into this in a hype video that is centered around getting you hyped for a big offseason coming up? Is it weird that they highlight so many of those star players that we have question marks heading into this offseason and barely show T. Higgins at all? Is there something there, or am I just overblowing this?
I thought the exact same thing when I watched it the first time, and maybe that's just fan brain working overtime and freaking out about everything I see this offseason. But, yeah, that's what I thought, too. I thought that that T. Higgins not being in that video as much was really a bad sign. But I heard a lot of people, on Twitter and everywhere else talking about how that was supposed to highlight the accomplishments of last season, and that's why it was Joe's MVP caliber season, Trey Hendrickson leading the league in sacks, and Jamar Chase's triple crown. T. Higgins, only played 12 games. He had a great year, nearly 1,000 yards, but none of those milestones, if you will. And I think that's kind of why they went off of him in that video, or at least that's what I'm telling myself now to try to talk myself out of them already having their mind made up in terms of not extending him.
Yeah, I as an overthinker, and I'm one of the world's great overthinkers, I'm constantly worrying about everything. I did notice it, and I if you're trying to hype everybody up for next year, I feel like it would have been better to have or include T. But if they're going to do what Jacob said and they're going to highlight the three guys that were, they could have won awards, they could have won Defensive Player of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year, and MVP. If you want to highlight those three, then you could certainly do that, and you could explain that to me in a way that made sense. I think that T. Higgins probably should have been in the video more.
Yeah, and that's right where I went. Now, Jacob, you brought up the fans that have said, well, hold on, it looked like they were just highlighting some accomplishments, like obviously the triple crown for Jamar Chase, and then the sack totals for, of course, Trey Hendrickson. But I feel like if, as a front office, they've made up their mind that, hey, we love what Trey Hendrickson did, but we feel like the money that we're going to invest into him, we can use that money to plug multiple holes on the defense, and we're not going to overhype him heading in. I think the fact that they used him a lot. I think Trey's back. I think that obviously Jamar's going to be taken care of. I just thought it was interesting, the lack of usage of T, especially with Joe Burrow going on a media tour talking about how much of a need T. Higgins is. He's been screaming how much of a need T. Higgins is since the Cowboys game. So as we talked about last week, maybe overlooking or maybe looking too much into it, but that's what we do. It's off-season time. So now it's all about that. But we're also going to dissect literally every time, whether it's Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, whether it's Duke Tobin, anyone in the front office, any social media intern that puts out a hype video, anyway, and that's not fair. I think they have professional people that build those videos, so that's a little disrespectful. But you know what I mean. So anytime these guys say anything or put any content out, we're going to over dissect it, trying to figure out what's going to happen next. So T. Higgins was out and about this past weekend, and Joe Daneman with Cincinnati's local Fox station, Fox 19. Had a chance to catch up with T. Higgins and kind of ask, get his side. Joe Burrow's been all over the place, doing media hits. We're hearing a lot about them, but what about what T. Higgins has to say? We put a lot of emphasis into the fact that he switched agents. We thought, okay, there's something there. Maybe he didn't like the messaging of his previous agent, and maybe this is a guy that's going to represent him, that's going to allow a little flexibility to help the Bengals and him win. I don't know what to feel about this or you guys. Here's the clip, T. Higgins talking about his future in Cincinnati and the upcoming offseason that will dictate his future plans. Take a look.
Joe said that you guys have had discussions as a group about staying together. Is he correct that you guys have actually talked about this in a future where not just you, Jamar, and Joe, but also Trey all stay Cincinnati Bengals?
Yeah, of course. We all want to, keep the core pieces what it is. Even with Mike Gesicki, that's a core piece as well. So obviously we want to build something here in Cincy, but it's not in my hands right now. So I got to do what I need to do, and if that's go to another team, and that's what happens. So.
Well, a lot of Bengals fans will be watching this, T, and they all want you to stay. You know that. What is your priority when it comes to this offseason in finding the best fit for you and your future?
Right now, I'm just trying to stay away from it right now and, clear my head, get away from the game, especially after tonight. Clear my head, get away from the game for a few weeks, and then obviously in March, that's when things start ramping up for me with the free agency coming up. And then, obviously I would love to be here in Cincinnati. I love it here. I love the city. I love the fans. I love the, coaching staff, everything in the building. But, hey, it's not in my control.
Screams, I want to come back. They're not paying me.
That's what
that video screams.
That's what I read into it too. I think if you watch the video, it's like it's almost like the answer is already out there, and we're just waiting for the ball to drop. That's what I got from it. It doesn't sound good. I mean, it doesn't sound good. My only argument against myself would be they are going to look so bad if they don't bring one of them back. They are going to look so bad. And it's going to be bad for Joe Burrow. It's going to be bad for the Browns. It's going to be bad for the Blackburns. It's going to be bad for Tobin. It's going to be bad if you don't bring one of them back. And I don't understand, if you have the ability to do it, why you don't do it. I don't get it. And if somebody smarter than me would like to explain it to me, that's great. I don't understand it. You can't draft. You've shown it. You're not very good at hitting free agents, if we're going to be honest. You've shown it. So you have two guys that are stars at their positions. You have the finances to do so. Bring them back. Make your quarterback and your fan base happy. It's a no-brainer for me, and I got a bad vibe from watching that. That was the first time I've seen that clip. I got a bad vibe from watching that one.
The Eagles just hoisted the Lombardi Trophy, paying Hurts $52 a year, A.J. Brown $32 a year, Devontae Smith $26 a year, 2 offensive linemen more than 20, an edge rusher 17, a tight end 15, and 2 corners over 13. That doesn't even mention Saquon Barkley at $11.5 million.
Yep.
It's 100% doable. You just have to fit in the draft, and you can't be doing contracts like it's the 80s anymore. You have to be flexible. You have to be creative, and you can get it done. There is no excuse financially.
Yeah, I found it telling when and by the way, that's good. Joe asked him good questions too, because when he said, well, what are you prioritizing this offseason? I thought that was a hell of a question, because it wasn't a trick question. It wasn't trying to put him on the spot, but not in a bad way. But it was like, okay, what are you prioritizing? Are you prioritizing being a part of something? Because he's said in the past the importance of playing with a quarterback like Joe Burrow, how important that is. So are you prioritizing fit, or are you prioritizing dollars? And let's be clear, I don't like when we do that to athletes where we act like, you can't have both. I mean, he could fit elsewhere. He could fit in Washington. He could fit in with the Chargers. He could fit in a lot of places and get his money. But I thought the fact that he didn't just say, hey, I want to go, we're the highest bidder. He can't say that. So he just said, hey, I'm not thinking about it. I think he got his point across, though. I think he let it be known it's not up to me. And that it has to be right. I think it was just a very telling clip. So I think between that and between that hype video, so at the hype video, I'm like, all right, I'm overthinking this. I don't think anyone's overthinking anything. That hype video said he's not part of, the important offseason coming up. Well, he's not a part of it, or he is, just not in the way that a lot of Bengals fans want. So between that hype video and the lack of inclusion of him in there, and of course that complimentary piece by Joe Danneman again with Fox in Cincinnati, Danneman, I don't feel good about T's future in Cincinnati moving forward, but we'll see. Welcome to the offseason.
They're gonna look so bad. They're gonna look so bad.
They're gonna look so bad if it doesn't work. If they bring Trey back and they let T walk and they invest in the defense, and the Bengals have a top 10 defense next year, and the offense falls to the 8th or 9th, and they go and win 2 playoff games because the defense is great, then they're not going to look bad. But if the offense takes a step back and the defense gets to league average, and you don't do anything because the offense isn't good enough, that's when they start to look terrible.
Yep. That was the point I was going to say as well. I think that if they don't extend T or keep T, I don't think that's the final. I don't think that's the point of judgment. I think there's a 2-part equation here. I think that's the first part of the equation, not bringing T back, but what do you do with the money that you don't give to T, that, let's say $30 million a year? Where's that $30 million a year going? How are you using that to disperse throughout the roster to bulk it up? I think it's a 2-part judgment. The judgment point of letting him go is going to be significant, but I do, like you said, if a year from now we see the balanced roster, if there's the offense takes a little bit of a hit, but the defense takes a rise and they're more of a balanced team. I mean, let's be real. That we just watched a very, very, the team that won last night, the most balanced team in football. If the 49ers are healthy, that's one of the most balanced teams in football. That was the team that was in the Super Bowl last year. Even when the Bengals made it to the Super Bowl, it was a balance of offense and defense, not statistically from the whole year, but from that run in the playoffs. Balance is key. They are not balanced right now. And if they feel that the money that goes to T helps them balance what they have with Trey Hendrickson on defense, maybe that's the key to success moving forward. But they have to draft well. They have to do well in free agency. It's going to be drama, though, no matter what decision they make.
Oh, yeah.
I do like that most people that are in the team, you got to let T walk, you got to spend the money elsewhere, are also saying that you need to use every draft pick and dollar you have on defense. Those two things are antithetical to each other. If you let T. Higgins walk, a top 3 need this offseason is wide receiver. Maybe number 1 need.
I'd argue number 1, but and people you don't have right now. You don't have a pass catching tight end, and you don't have a number 1 wide receiver. If you let Gesicki and T go, that you're setting yourself up for failure. I know Patrick Mahomes. I know good quarterbacks have been able to do it without 2 elite guys. I'm not saying that Joe Burrow isn't capable of doing it. I'm saying, why would you do it to him if you have the ability to not do it?
The other thing is, everyone says if you're going to pay these guys top of the market value, you have to draft well. And the Bengals can't draft well, so you shouldn't pay these guys top of the market value. I would argue if you can't draft well, that's more of a reason to not let your very few draft hits leave the building.
Yeah.
Well, what makes you think they can just all of a sudden draft well to replace the guys that they've shockingly hit on? Fall into their lap in a lot of these cases. So I don't think you can let these guys go just because the Bengals haven't drafted well. I actually think that's a reason to re-sign these guys.
By the way, when Elliot said great word, antithetical, for those listening and watching at home, it's really directly opposed or contrasted, mutually incompatible. People whose religious beliefs are antithetical to mine, to use that in a sentence. So there you go. But nice word, yes. Beautiful word. All right, we'll step away. We go from one hype video in Cincinnati to the next. And by the way, the Bengals talk will continue. The offseason, it's finally here, moving forward. The Reds put out a hype video of their own. We'll take a look at that when we come back. Pitchers and catchers report to spring training today across Major League Baseball. We're getting closer and closer. We'll talk about that when we come back. Hype video season continues. We watched the hype video that the Bengals just put out about, attacking the offseason with everything that they have. It's a very important offseason for them, but it's a very important season coming up for the Cincinnati Reds. A year ago at this time, everyone was super optimistic. The sky's the limit. The Reds are about to become the biggest story one of the best feel-good stories in baseball. They were one of the more disappointing stories in baseball a season ago. And I feel like with all the moves that the Reds have made, there's some projections out there that this is a last place team. And then there's prognosticators out there that have this as the second most improved team behind the Dodgers. And to look out for the feel-good story Reds this year. The range is just so significant.
The Reds are going to win somewhere between 70 and 100 games.
No doubt.
Maybe.
Oh, no.
If it goes bad.
You're not comfortable taking somewhere between 70 and 100 wins for the Reds?
I'm just saying it could go bad. All I'm saying is it could go bad.
Hope it doesn't go that bad.
I'm just saying it could go bad.
We all need to get hyped for the Reds, and the best way to get hyped for the Reds
right. You're right.
Is a hype video. Let's see if the hype video works.
Right.
Casey, cue it up. We're ready to rock.
They have high hopes, and why not?
It's a big step to take for this team.
We need to get better from it.
Play cleaner baseball.
What we did wrong. Right
now, best out of this show. Take on the Central.
That Brady Singer acquisition, Lux and
Austin Hayes.
This team has huge upside. Kona has to be excited about
to being a serious contender in 2025.
Once the game starts, nothing else matters.
all the noise fades away. The only thing we care about is our team. But before opening day, you gotta earn the right to wear our uniform. You will put in the work, you will make sacrifices, you will find weaknesses and turn them into strengths. You will play the game correctly and with respect. So when the time comes, we will all be ready. This group has a chance to be something special. Not only good, but one of the best teams in baseball.
And he drills this ball.
The pieces are there.
Hunter Green clean. Comeback steal.
The drive. The hustle.
Line drive caught by De La Cruz.
And the talent.
Thinking of this, he struck him out. Struck him out.
All the makings of a championship team. Now we have to go earn it.
God damn it, I want to run through a freaking wall right now.
Yeah.
Francona. I
love the focal point of the preseason hype video being the coach.
Love it.
Especially that coach, or that manager, that guy.
I do love Terry Francona. I would have liked the best thing the Reds. I was being sarcastic. I would have liked the best thing the Reds did this offseason to not have been hiring a manager.
But listen, it was the best one.
It was the best manager.
It was the best one they could have got, and I'm all in. After watching that, I'm all in. I'm all in.
Okay.
The Reds.
I think we need to make Jacob. Your homework is to go home and watch this 100 times on loop. You're not hyped enough.
I think I'm more in than Elliot by a mile on this season.
I think he is. I'm keeping my expectations down. Come on, guys.
And I'm obviously a big Terry Francona fan, incredibly excited for him to be the manager of this team. But it's just, every single graphic that we've shown about this Reds offseason, best addition, one, manager. Hype video, it's Terry Francona narrating it. And that's a great addition, and he's an exciting hire. I would have loved to have the best offseason addition not be the coach after we spent 3 months talking about how little the coach matters on this show.
To be fair, who would that have been?
It just feels a little slimy.
You can't say like Juan Soto or somebody.
I don't know. With the guys we realistically could have got, none of them were a bigger name than Terry Francona. So with what you're asking, I think the Reds probably did the best they could have. I think there was obviously some inflated expectations going into the offseason with how everything shook out. It wasn't realistic, and I stand by that the Reds did a good job. How many graphics can I see with a team that was, not good last year and their best addition being a coach? I don't know how excited that gets me to be for this next season.
Man. But the video, the hype video.
It's a good hype video.
It's all black and white to start.
I'm hyped.
It was it was all black and white to start. There was clips from last year's team, and it was talking about the lack of discipline, all the errors, all the deficiencies, and then they show the clip of Francona being hired, and then you start to see at the bottom of the screen, it starts moving up. The bottom of the screen starts to show in color, and then it's becoming more in color as they start adding more players. It was a great hype video. It's way better than whatever the hell they showed us at the media day that day. I will be honest.
I was
not hyped. The volume was too low. We're having to lean in, squint to see what's on the TV. This did it for me.
If we're doing the who's in the video game, Will Benson front and center.
That's right. That's our guy.
He making the roster?
Hero.
Whew.
The breadcrumbs that are left by these hype videos.
Yeah, no Stuart Fairchild.
Ooh.
Yeah, we got to read into this a little bit.
A little bit. All right, that wraps it up for us on the radio side. Appreciate you guys. We'll do this again tomorrow. Until tomorrow, this has been Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. All right, we're back off the bench. Just YouTube now. Now we can cuss, right? Now I can.
Yeah.
I haven't dropped the F-bomb on this show in a while. It's starting it's starting to build up. No.
I can throw the helmet right now. You just give me the sign, baby.
Can say whatever the heck we want.
What the hell we want.
I'll throw a Bengals helmet any day of the week, but I'm not going to throw this baby.
There we go.
There we go.
Where do you get these helmets that are 30 years outdated? I mean, these silhouettes are preposterous. I mean, no one has worn a helmet like this since they started playing organized football.
There is a listener of the show. His name is Jim Belmer. Shout out to Belmer. And he at an auction won, or like he bid on like some what are those little not garages, but just storage units. And inside it had pallets and pallets and pallets of helmets.
That is awesome.
And he took all these helmets. They're all they're all white helmets, white plain helmets. So what's really nice of him too, this was around 2020 when there was a lot of, if you remember, there was a lot of high schools that because they were not distributing helmets or producing helmets anymore, there was a lot of high schools who had helmet shortages. So he donated a ton of helmets to local high schools throughout that were having helmet shortages. So that's was really nice of him. And then, of course, he was watching our show on YouTube one day. We didn't have anything behind us, so he went ahead and spray painted these and just customized them that way. They're not the top. I mean, that's why I threw it. I mean, it's just, I knew
awesome.
it could handle the damage, but yeah. So I appreciate Belmer. He did a good job with those. He gave me a Browns one, a Bengals one, and an Ohio State one.
Yeah, that is great. I'm a big helmet. I have a helmet behind me, a Bengals helmet behind me in my backdrop. I think helmets are one of the cooler looking sports items.
I agree.
You go down the line.
Speaking of sports, before we get to more of the Super Bowl, I wanted to mention this.
Speaking of sports is an incredible segue.
You like that?
You should use that at minimum once a show.
There was no way we were going to get to our next segment if I didn't, or our next topic if I didn't do that.
Speaking of sports.
Yeah. So I sent this to Jacob yesterday, and I just thought I thought we should at least mention it. The Dallas Mavericks wanted to prioritize health, and they did the right thing by trading their franchise 25-star face of the league player away. Yeah, they traded him away, and they wanted to prioritize health. And I just checked my ESPN notifications, and Anthony Davis is out indefinitely. So after one game, after one half.
Indefinitely.
So, listen, good for them.
One dominant half, though.
One great half.
He was absolutely killing it.
One great
half. That was the first quarter. It was amazing
really?
what he did. Oh, yeah, that was the first quarter.
He was a monster.
Yeah, so good. I just wanted a quick shout-out then before we moved on back to the Super Bowl. Good job, Dallas. You traded away your franchise for Iron Man Anthony Davis. Good job.
Did you see the fans that were protesting outside the stadium before that Mavericks game? My favorite line ever, he's not fat, bring him back. I love that. I think that, I thought that was a great line there. But keep in mind, too, yes, Anthony Davis is dominant when he's out on the floor. That's why I said before, I was like, this isn't that bad of a trade if you just look at the talent that was swapped as far as that goes. He's not better than Luka, but when he's on the floor, he is a dominant big man, arguably top 3 big men in the league. The problem is it's hard to keep him out there. And I was like, that's why I tweeted out, I was like, that was the most Anthony Davis game ever. Just pure dominance on the floor and then holding his groin as he's walking off the floor and he's out indefinitely. That's unfortunate. But keep in mind, from a health standpoint, the Lakers have had to play multiple games already without Luka, and they screwed up the ESPN lineup over the weekend for his debut, and he wasn't healthy for the debut on Saturday, so he's going to debut tonight for the Lakers. He's not 100% healthy either, and there's some believe that he's not healthy for tonight, but that they're almost forcing it and risking further injury. We'll see what stat line he puts up tonight in his debut with the Lakers.
Why do the Lakers care about these narratives? They got Luka. They want to trade. If he's not healthy, don't play him. He's 25 years old. He's a superstar. Keep him healthy for the future. There's no reason to force him into a game in the middle of February just because you want to prove some people wrong that it's not a problem that you traded for him. He's going to be fine. He's going to be a great player in L.A. Don't force him back just to try to prove a point.
Did you see this? Ohio Governor Mike DeWine has appointed former Ohio State football coach Jim Tressel Ohio Lieutenant Governor, subject to confirmation by the Ohio General Assembly.
Really?
Lieutenant Tressel. How about that?
There we go, Tress.
There we go.
Speaking of sports, what do you got?
Speaking of sports, the Super Bowl, we were having this debate. They did play a game last night. It was called the Super Bowl. We were having this debate off air, and I said last night, and mainly because I had money on the Kansas City Chiefs, that it was the worst Super Bowl ever. I truly do think it was. I mean,
it was down there. It's in the discussion.
It was about as uncompetitive as you can get. I forgot how bad they lost to Tampa Bay. 31-9 is pretty bad. But where do you have the worst Super Bowl ever in your lifetime?
Those two are pretty bad. Seattle 43, Denver 8. Absolutely terrible.
Terrible.
My worst Super Bowl of my lifetime is actually a game that was relatively close. It was the Patriots-Rams game, the 13-3 game.
Yeah.
If we're going to have a blowout, it's not ideal to me, but I'd rather have a blowout where you're scoring 50 total points than 23.
Yeah.
So, or 16. That was 13-3, 16 points total in that game. Not something that interests me. That low-scoring game like that was definitely the worst in terms of viewing experience for me, at least in those blowouts. You're cashing anytime touchdown bets and stuff like that. So, I mean, I had 13-3 game. Yeah, I'm good.
13-3 is bad. That game did suck. That was
one touchdown?
Yeah, that was horrible. And it had a bad halftime show too. Maroon 5 was terrible. Last night I just felt like the Chiefs, I mean, they didn't play even remotely competent football at any point during that first half. Patrick Mahomes was just he had I felt like 3 seconds to throw the football or it was just done. The play was absolutely done. He couldn't extend anything yesterday. Couldn't complete a pass. He could not scramble yesterday. He couldn't scramble. He was terrible. I mean, from the very jump, I don't know if they just didn't prepare. I don't know if they were just outcoached. I don't know if there was such a giant talent discrepancy between the Eagles' defensive line and the Chiefs' offensive line. But it was over immediately, and
just so you guys know,
it was tough to watch.
Just so you guys know, what's going to come of this, by the way, because I already heard it this morning. I think it was on Unsportsmanlike. One of the interviews in the post game, Patrick Mahomes. What was your health like coming into this game? Not 100%. But I was good to go. Not 100%. I'm just letting you guys know that's what he's going to have some strained oblique that he played
Death
through.
taxes Mahomes ankle injury.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yes. He wasn't 100%, guys. Come on.
Yeah, it wasn't 100%. Good job. I thought the game was going to go a very different way on that offensive pass interference call because that did go to the Kansas City Chiefs.
You actually sent a text.
I did.
What does it say?
I said it was very. I think I said, and I'm going to rephrase it here. I said it was. Could you imagine not betting on the Kansas City Chiefs? It's very fun.
Could you imagine last night not having the Chiefs?
No.
I wish.
Yeah, I mean, I've
been imagining it all day.
I got smoked. I got absolutely smoked. A lot of the discussion last night wasn't the game because it was terrible. Shout out Patrick Mahomes, terrible performance from you. It was the Super Bowl halftime show. The halftime show got a lot of discussion, a lot of discourse last night. What were your guys' thoughts on that one?
I didn't think it was bad. I thought it was all right. I thought it was more or less what I would expect from a Kendrick halftime show. I wish he played some of his older songs, but I think when you're so constrained to a short set list, you kind of go with what's new and what's popping. And I think he did a decent job with that. I don't think rap is built for a Super Bowl halftime show. Maybe that's a bad take, but I think the people that do the Super Bowl halftime shows should always be someone that any random person on the street knows 3 or 4 of their songs. And I just don't think that's the case with Kendrick Lamar, at least not right now. Maybe a couple years ago, Good Kid, Mad City and all that stuff, maybe he would have been even bigger then. I'm not sure. I think if you're going to do rap as Super Bowl halftime, you have to do it the route they did it in L.A. when the Bengals were playing the Rams, where you have a big group of guys, they all play their hits. I just don't think rap works well for it. I think they should always go pop or rock, something that's a little bit more performative, something a little bit more entertaining. I thought it was a good contract or a concert. I don't think it was the best choice. I think he did about as good as he could have done, though. I don't think he did a bad job.
No, yeah,
I think it was more of a bad choice.
Like the people for the Super Bowl halftime show, they just want flashing lights. They want like what The Weeknd did. We had like 500 extras on the field dancing around to blinding lights. They just want the spectacle. Nobody wants like the message. Nobody wants to think. They just want the Katy Perry riding around on an electronic tiger with the shark thing right next to her. Like that's what people want during this.
Like, would I rather go see Kendrick Lamar in concert or The Weeknd in concert? I'd rather see Kendrick Lamar. The Weeknd's a better halftime show.
It's a better halftime show. The people want the spectacle, and that's fine. Like I'd argue, and I went back and I actually watched some of the previous halftime shows last night after the game because it was like that performance, like people were saying it was the worst ever.
That's crazy.
I don't think you guys remember how bad Maroon 5 and the Black Eyed Peas were. Black Eyed Peas was one of the worst performances in entertainment history. I don't think anybody was as bad as them. And Maroon 5, if you go back and listen to Maroon 5, like I know SZA last night, she
wasn't on.
She very clearly was lip syncing the entire time. But I'd rather that than what Adam Levine and Maroon 5 did, and that was the Super Bowl for the 13-3 game. And he sounded terrible. It was so bad. Again, it was nowhere near. People were saying it was the worst ever. You got to go back and watch some of the old ones because there's some terrible ones. It's not the best ever just because of what Jacob said. I just don't think it's meant to be like a thoughtful thing. It's supposed to be. I want to see Katy Perry riding a giant electronic tiger.
Yeah.
Give me Creed, baby. Well, you know, let's go back to the was it that Thanksgiving halftime show in Dallas? Like, that's like, you know, but no, last night's was not a bad performance. I just don't think it was a good Super Bowl halftime show. It's kind of repeating a little bit of what you guys said. Like, it didn't do anything for me. I was like, okay, whatever. Like, this isn't good. Who should it be next year? I'm gonna go with Post Malone. I think Post Malone. I don't know, where is the Super Bowl next year?
Cool. San Francisco, Levi's Stadium.
So I say Post Malone because it could be very similar to the Super Bowl that the Bengals was in when it was so many stars. Obviously, you have your headliner. Post Malone would be the main guy.
Yeah.
But because he did so many country hits with some of the biggest artists out there, can you imagine the overlap of bringing out like current country singers and then some of the older ones? He did a hit with like Reba and with some older generational country singers and modern country singers. So I would like to see Post Malone as the halftime entertainment for next year because he would check off a lot of boxes. I think he can mix in some of his country hits and some of his, cross-platform hits. So I'm all for Post Malone next year as the halftime entertainment.
He was a name I saw a lot of people throwing out. I think that would be a pretty good choice. A guy that dances across multiple genres, I think, would be good. I think a very likely choice would probably be Beyonce. She's already done two Super Bowls in her past. She just won Country Album of the Year. I could definitely see her being the choice next year in San Francisco. I don't know. If you want to go the iconic route in San Francisco, maybe you get Dead and Company to play the halftime show. That would be electric. But obviously that would be even more polarizing than something like Kendrick in terms of who likes it and who doesn't. But I think they should always go, if you're going to do a singular artist, they should have done Lil Wayne and they should have done someone, like they did with Dr. Dre. I think you always should do someone connected to the city. And if you're going to go that solo route, otherwise go performative, go big time, go big lights, go big speakers. But I would certainly like if they kept a little local flair to every concert. I did think last night as a whole, the broadcast, we got it. The game was played in New Orleans.
Yeah.
Like, I think we got that pretty early.
Oh, yeah.
The green screen Bourbon Street in the broadcast booth, don't think that was necessary. I don't think anyone asked for that.
And we didn't even...
Lady Gaga playing the piano.
That was cool. She was good. That was good.
But why?
Well, that was
the walk and everything was great, but why was she playing the piano in the middle of Bourbon Street?
Yeah, I mean,
all the New Orleans stuff to me, it seemed like it was played up a little bit, that it was in New Orleans and the graphics and everything like that more than any other city.
Oh, we didn't even talk about the graphics. We didn't talk about the worst score bug in the history of the Super Bowl.
Casey's got to have some takes on the score bug as a producer extraordinaire.
Casey, what are we doing there? I mean,
you built a score bug or two in your day?
Who rolls that out for the biggest game of the year?
Who says yes to rolling that out for the biggest game of the year?
Dude, the numbers were like the numbers, like there was no background on it, so the numbers just blended in with the lines on the field.
Yeah, it felt like I was showcasing that score bug. Like, hey, Trace, do you think this is gonna work?
And then I'll change the letters to a logo.
Like, I haven't added the background yet. Like, do you like the way it looks though? You like the font type? Like, that's the stage that they were in when they showcased that last night. And what's crazy is like the pop outs with like the players and like that all looked great. It just looked incomplete.
And when they flipped it to stats, like rushing yards and everything, the KC and PHI changed to logos.
Really?
Yes. Yeah, like when they would show who leads the game in sacks and 0 to 5 or whatever, it would flip to logos. So they built a decent score bug and then they just changed it. I don't understand why they would go this way. There's no way they roll this out week 1, right?
They can't.
They're going to change it this offseason.
No, they won't do that.
I don't mean to be that guy, but I genuinely think if I did a live stream today, I could do it in 2 hours. What they did for their
score bug?
Yeah, just their what they had for the main part of the game. I think I could recreate that like that. It's not that hard what they did. I mean, it was just like they had a giant, like, had a font type that they liked, and they put green squares and red squares, and we're just like, all right, let's just throw in some.
I will say I like the transparency, like in between. I don't necessarily care for like the big block across the bottom. I thought the transparency was cool. The font was terrible, or just the fact that it was the font. Like KC and PHI and the big blocks were terrible. everyone that says they liked it was just trying to be a contrarian, right?
Yeah.
No one actually liked that.
Nobody liked that. That was terrible. We saw it. They flashed it a little bit right before the game started and then took it away.
I thought it was fake.
I thought it was fake too. I thought it was a mistake. So bad.
And on top of that, I think early on, and they realized because they didn't show those graphics again, early on there was a moment where some of the numbers were being clipped from their graphics.
Really?
Yeah, I was like, what? Like, how can that go through?
That's pretty funny.
It was just not good.
Sometimes
it felt incomplete.
That's right.
It did.
Sometimes less is more, and I'm fine with that sometimes. But that was not it. That was
less was less.
Yeah. All right. Well, that we're done today. You guys have box lunch coming up.
That's
Box
right.
lunch.
We might get into college basketball tomorrow.
Maybe.
We might. Maybe.
We'll see.
Yeah. But all right, guys. Thank you. We'll do this again tomorrow. Until tomorrow, Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers.
Love you all.